Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Thursday, October 27th, 2022. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Dan Bouk, chair of the Department of History at Colgate University, which rejected my college application, and author of Democracy's Data, The Hidden Stories in the U.S. Census, and How to Read Them. Just editorializing a little. That's relevant. And later in the program, Akela Lacy, politics reporter at the Intercept, will be joining us to discuss the impeachment efforts against Philadelphia DA Larry Krasner. Meanwhile, average 30-year mortgage rates have reached over 7%, the highest level since 2002, due to the Fed's aggressiveness on rate hikes. It was 3.14% this time last year. So, instead of addressing corporate gouging, this is the price that we all will pay. Democrats are beginning to fear the worst ahead of the midterm elections, which are now 12 days away. Fetterman's lead continues to narrow in Pennsylvania. However, Josh Shapiro's lead over Doug Mastriano continues to be comfortable, so perhaps that can benefit Fetterman. Fingers crossed. In other gubernatorial races, Kathy Hochul's race versus Republican Lee Zeldin is proving tougher than expected here in New York. Polls are narrowing. The theme is crime and the economy for the Republicans. Speaking of those midterms, over 100 lawsuits have been preemptively filed to challenge the results, mostly by Republicans. This is the kind of environment that right-wingers want with our electoral process. It's just going to keep getting worse, especially after the election. A second woman has come out and said that Herschel Walker pressured her to have an abortion and paid for it after an extramarital affair a few decades ago. And the woman was a Trump voter, by the way. Speaking of Trump, he's headed to Miami to campaign for his best buddy, Little Marco. Wait, they're friends now? Rip-off Ron, that's what I like to call him, not expected to make an appearance. The Cold War between Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump continues. And that Marco Rubio staffer who was beaten up, turns out he did not claim the attack was politically motivated when police officers first interviewed him, and only changed his story the next day when Rubio tweeted about it. Brittany Griner's sentence in Russia is being upheld, meaning unless the U.S. is able to free her, she will serve 9 years in a penal colony doing physical labor. There's no end in sight to this. We have to free Brittany Griner. And lastly, a second rail union has rejected the deal pushed by the Biden administration in September, meaning a strike could happen as soon as November 19th. Give these rail workers more sick leave, my God. Not that hard. And raises while you're at it. All this and more on today's program. Welcome to the show. It is an Majority Report Thursday. We have Matt and Bradley with you. Later in the fun half, we will have old Matt and new and singular and current Brandon, where we'll be taking your calls, reading your
original
IMs.
Brandon.
The original and current.
There's an imposter in the White House. There's imposter Brandon.
Oh, yes. he'd be like thrilled to be called new in any capacity, Joe Biden.
I'm new Brandon.
All right. Well, hey, hello everybody. We are a little late to start the show because we were talking about Dunkin' Donuts for 5 minutes and then looked at the clock. So here we are.
Going item by item, but what my favorite things on the menu are.
Well, the hash browns are pretty damn good, I gotta say.
Take over to the Doughboys.
But let's turn to this Herschel Walker news because a second woman now has come out, going by Jane Doe, sharing her story of how she was involved with Herschel Walker in the early 1990s when he was married. She got pregnant with his child and ultimately decided to get an abortion at the encouragement of Herschel Walker. She characterizes it, I believe, as pressure to get that abortion. So now we've got two people on the board whose abortions Herschel Walker has allegedly paid for, because that's also in this story.
Yeah, and I just want to bring out, we had Dominique Remy on the show to talk about, sort of the different things that go into supporting mothers. And on top of, allowing access to abortion is allowing them support for if they do want to have that child, that they aren't beholden to, say, somebody like Herschel Walker coercing them into having an abortion.
Right. Exactly. You're not at the behest of the rich guy who you have been having a relationship with to pay for it. But I mean, in Herschel, to his credit, he seems to have paid for these abortions. But at the same time, it's it's just putting lipstick on a pig in terms of the situation.
For him, it's probably a good investment.
And it would be no problem, frankly. I wouldn't even care if he was just like a standard Republican who says he's been saved now and was hypocritical in his past. If he wanted to do that on his own, that's fine. But he's running to be one of the 100 most powerful people in the United States as a member of the U.S. Senate. So here is this Jane Doe speaking at a news conference by Gloria Allred, still remaining anonymous, about her experience.
I really didn't know what to do. I was confused, uncertain, and scared. After discussing the pregnancy with Herschel several times, he encouraged me to have an abortion and gave me the money to do so. I went to a clinic in Dallas, but I simply couldn't go through with it. I left the clinic in tears. When I told Herschel what had happened, he was upset and said that he was going to go back with me to the clinic the next day for me to have the abortion. He then drove me to the clinic the following day and waited for hours in the parking lot until I came out. He then drove me to get medications and supplies as prescribed, and then drove me home. I was devastated because I felt that I had been pressured into having an abortion. After the abortion, I felt that Herschel began distancing himself from me. I fled Dallas within days after the abortion and did not go back to even visit for the next 15 years because I was so traumatized by what Herschel had put me through.
That speaks volumes here, where if she had, as Matt said, the resources to make this decision on her own, maybe, and if we had some sort of adequate social safety net in this country, maybe she wouldn't have made that choice. And the point is that abortion is a choice.
And
it should be a choice for a woman.
Yeah, and we should also underline, Herschel Walker, by his own admission, he has a history of making violent threats. So that underlines the pressure that she felt.
And let alone the fact that he was a star athlete with immense financial resources who could make her life really difficult if she did not comply with this. The point is that what Herschel Walker wants to do is take away choices for any woman. So it's actually quite consistent, frankly, with the way that he's operated in his personal life. He wants to control women and their decisions. now, as a Senate candidate, he wants to do the same, except on the federal level. He's embraced Lindsey Graham's abortion ban on the federal level, which the rest of the Republican Party has tried to distance themselves from.
And he's going to have to, because if he gets into power, he's going to have to prove himself on this because of all this stuff is out now. And so it's going to be like, well, I'm even extra. Like, that's why he signs on to the Graham stuff, because like, no one's going to be to the right of me on abortion now.
Let's play this clip then here, because as these stories come out, it makes sense, right, that he has to take this tack, as you say, Matt, because he has to overcompensate for these stories. No one's going to be more against a woman's right to choose than myself. I am going to be the religious fundamentalist who has been saved. That's his whole thing. I've been redeemed. I've been saved. And now I will be the theocrat representing the state of Georgia. And so Lindsey Graham joined Herschel Walker on Fox News last night to kind of link arms here, because Herschel Walker is one of the only Senate candidates who's actually embracing Lindsey Graham's legislation, which has Mitch McConnell basically smacked him for.
And before we play this, can I just say, for any pro wrestling fans out there, this is literally Lindsey Graham like cutting a promo for the person he's representing. Like in wrestling, usually that what happens is like when there's a guy like who doesn't really talk a whole lot, he has like a spokesperson who just kind of like has like flop sweat and just like rants in support of their guy. So like, I just want to be clear before we get to this, no spoilers. Herschel Walker does not say a word in this clip.
There we go.
I've seen this movie before, up close and personal. If you're a conservative, they don't give a damn about the truth. They're trying to destroy his life 13 days before the election. They did the same thing to Kavanaugh. There's another one and another one and another one. It got to be 6. 3 people out and out lied. Nothing happened to them. How did that movie end? Kavanaugh is on the Supreme Court. Herschel's going to the Senate. And what is this all about? Why Herschel?
Patriarchy.
They're beating all of our guys up, but what is it?
All right, just pause it for a really quick second. I'm sorry. Look what it proves. It doesn't matter anyway. Then why are you getting so indignant, dude? No, what it proves is that we still have a long way to go for women to be heard and understood, and for their feelings and for their experiences to be valued in the eyes of voters and in the eyes of the halls of power. Kavanaugh was put onto the Supreme Court despite those allegations because the Republicans like yourself controlled the Senate. Nothing has changed for him. He's fine. He's a Supreme Court justice. And Herschel Walker, if he loses this race, he'll be fine. He'll be a rich athlete who's doing whatever the hell he wants and sleeping with whatever women that he continues that he wants at this point.
I like that. Like, another new story of me coercing someone to have an abortion came out. Why is this happening to me?
And what is with her, right? And what is with Lindsey Graham has no idea who he is unless he's backing up another Republican. He did this being the cheerleader for John McCain for his entire career. Now he's trying to find the new organism for him to have like this symbiotic relationship with to help Herschel Walker out here.
And take a wild guess who he compares Herschel Walker's plight to. I'll give you like 5 seconds before he gets to it.
What, Kavanaugh? Why, he just did that. Yeah, right, okay, right.
Kavanaugh is on the Supreme Court.
Okay.
Herschel's going to the Senate. And what is this all about? Why Herschel? They're beating all of our guys up, but what is it about this guy? He changes the entire narrative of the left. We're a party of racists, Sean. Me and you're a racist. The Republican Party's racist. Well, what happens when the Republican Party elects and nominates Herschel Walker, an African-American black Heisman Trophy winner?
Let him speak then.
Right?
Heisman Trophy winner.
It destroys the whole narrative. John James, Tim Scott, Herschel Walker. Everybody in San Francisco is going to jump off a bridge if we elect this man. A black conservative beats a black liberal in Georgia.
All right, pause it for a sec. Just the visual. Don't take it off the screen. Look at him pointing, aggressively spittling everywhere at a speechless, like literally not talking Herschel Walker. Black. You are black, and you are my human prop to prove to all those liberals in San Francisco that I am not a racist.
He opens his mouth. Shut up, Herschel.
Yeah. I'm trying to talk about how you're black. I'm trying to talk about how you're black. Okay? Run, Herschel, run. Just like the Heisman. All right, keep going.
ruin his life. TeamHerschel.com. He's going to win this race. They've outspent him 3-1. It's no accident this crap comes out right before we vote on Kavanaugh. It's no accident it comes out 13 days right before the election by a liberal lawyer in L.A. who is a Democratic delegate in the 2016 convention. Again, anonymous, unverified. They're scared to death of Herschel Walker because if Herschel Walker becomes a Republican, maybe every other young child in America of color might want to be a Republican. That's what they're trying to do. Don't let them get away with it. TeamHerschel.com. I want the biggest night for the Herschel Walker campaign to be tonight. TeamHerschel.com. We've got an ad from hell. We just need the money behind it. You need to help this guy. They've dumped every pile of crap on him. He's worth fighting for. I've been with him for 2 days. I've come to respect him, admire him, and what he's going through is despicable.
Okay, all right, whatever. Yeah. He has the indignance down to a T here. He did this. He's just replaying the same hit with the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, which for people like us, we see that and we think he looks hysterical, but for a certain white conservative that feels like they're constantly under attack, it actually it hits. And him just like pointing to Herschel Walker and repeatedly saying that he's black while not letting him talk is just kind of a microcosm for how Republicans view candidates of color or female candidates who are running on their behalf. They don't really want to listen to broad experiences of black people or women or trans people or gay people. They want a representative that nullifies the overwhelming experiences that are described as, feeling discriminated against, being discriminated, being harmed physically, all of these kinds, and economically at a disadvantage constantly. Like, they don't want to listen to that chorus, the collective experience of certain populations in this country. They just want a human prop who they feel like, just because of their identity, can nullify the collective understanding of what it's like to be a certain group of people in America and uphold patriarchy and uphold capitalism. So the fact that Herschel Walker does not speak once in this clip just says it all, does it not? All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll be joined by Dan Bouk. We are back, and we are joined now by Dan Bouk, chair of the Department of History at Colgate University and author of Democracy's Data, The Hidden Stories in the U.S. Census and How to Read Them. Dan, thanks so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, Emma, thank you for having me here, for having me back. It's nice to be back on the show.
Oh yeah, of course. So let's talk about the census, right? I mean, for a lot of people, I feel like they go, "Oh, the census is dry. You got to do it every 10 years," and people might think it's some sort of modern invention because of the way I guess the perception of like the sophistication of it. Oh, you have to aggregate over 330 million people and their data, and yet it was in Article 1 of the Constitution. So it's been around since essentially the founding of the country. I mean, how are they even able to do this within the first 100 years or few decades of the United States?
Oh no, that's a great question. The census I speak of this as, and all these systems of quantification, all these data systems, as things that are really important. They produce Americans' facts. We need them to do really important things like figure out how to allocate power amongst the states. And that was indeed why it's in the Constitution, is so that when it comes time to elect representatives, each state is represented according to its population. When it comes time to elect the president, the Electoral College, the number of votes is dependent on the population of each state. But yeah, how do you do this? Since the very beginning, it was a massive mobilization. To begin with, they would send out marshals. Essentially, they would use a law enforcement organization that would then grab other people and send them out to count one another. By the early 20th century, this turns into this really mass mobilizations of hundreds of thousands of people who are hired by a professional census bureau, trained quickly, and then sent everywhere to knock on doors and try to ask questions and fit these people into this data system.
And you're, as well as being a historian, you have a mathematics background, right? If I remember reading correctly, it was not this cut and dry process, and never really has been, where populations are accurately measured. Blending some of your historical background and your mathematical background, what were some of the things that you observed in like just simple data tabulation that is either influenced by politics of the time, or the methodology being really, I guess the short answer of this is, or short question is, has the methodology ever really been sound?
Oh, I mean, sound, right there. That's the difficult word. Like, has the methodology been sound? And there's a couple of ways to answer this, and a couple of like really important moments at which we see the math and the question of the data aggregation all play out. So one of those involves what we might consider a discovery of the undercount. So since the census has been taking place, it's this incredibly difficult operation, and people often assumed that not everyone was being counted. From the very earliest on, we see Thomas Jefferson writing letters to people saying, it says in this first census that we're under 4 million, but we're pretty sure we're over that. But it's not really until the early 20th century, when it is a group of Black researchers working for the Census Bureau in a segregated Census Bureau office, who start to do the initial kind of serious scholarly work to show that there was, in fact, an undercount of people in the late 19th century censuses. And then that feeds into a variety of other research throughout the 20th century, such that now we have a vast apparatus. The Census Bureau has a big apparatus constructed on the premise that they're going to count, but they're also not going to be able to count everybody. They'll count some people too frequently, and other people in other groups they'll count too infrequently. This will be an undercount that they want to then evaluate and try to be able to pinpoint and figure out how to decrease that over time. But also it's something we can use to think about how we then apply these numbers and use them in governing.
So my first, when I was reading, your book, my first thought was the census definitely has undercounted poor people, maybe people who were trying to avoid tabulation by the government or did not want certain scrutiny. Black people, I'd imagine there are massive gaps in our history. what are some of the glaring gaps that you observed and that you found or you were able to glean to the best of your ability through your research?
Mm-hmm. I mean, this is important for us to think about in terms of like modern politics, but also many people who are watching this might have spent some time trying to think about their family's history, and they would have done genealogical work by looking at the census. And some of them will be very frustrated because they can't seem to find relatives, and they'll think it's their fault that they're bad researchers. But throughout all these censuses, a lot of people end up going uncounted. I have a friend who likes to say that the census is a great report card for American democracy, not just because of what it reports, but because of the ways it shows us when our democracy has failed to ensure that people have homes, which makes them easier to count, ensure that people are living have a standard of living such that they're going to be in a stable position, which again makes them easier to count, that assures that like we are devoting the resources and energy to get people and try and find them and count them. And to I think your final point, to make sure that people trust the government enough that they're willing to be counted. I mean, because distrust can frequently lead to people not wanting to be counted. I guess the final thing I'll say is whether people are represented is going to significantly affect whether or not they're counted, in part because having a representative who wants you to be counted really matters. I saw this in the 1940 census, where the highest undercount rates by far were in Washington, D.C., and it's not surprising that it was Washington, D.C., because there was no congressperson at that time who had any interest in there being a complete and full count of Washington, D.C. Whereas in other states, even in the Jim Crow South, people would be very sure to try to get a very accurate count, even of African Americans, precisely because they couldn't vote, but their population could be used to justify continued power of white politicians.
Yeah, I mean, I would also guess that one of the through lines of people being undercounted are people who mistrust the government because the government has largely abandoned them. And even if they're included in the census process, it's not for, as you say, actual representative democracy elements. It's more just to, increase the power of said representatives. And so there's no real incentive to participate in that. I'd imagine that was met with some skepticism.
It is. There's a consistent through line in census history of people meeting these questions with skepticism, feeling like this is an invasion of privacy. There is, though, I also emphasize the miracle of the census is that people generally do answer the questions. People often meet their neighbor at the door, and enumerators will write home and talk about how they were invited in for coffee, given some pie to eat afterwards, had to fend off multiple dinner invitations, as people are seeing this as a chance to participate. I was talking with some folks yesterday who were telling family stories about their immigrant households that saw that moment to participate in the census as a signifier of their full Americanness, or of African American households in which making sure we and our family and our communities are counted was understood to be a really significant part of what it means to be an American. And so while there are this constant undercurrent of people who don't trust and who don't answer this question, I think one of the more surprising things often is that this thing really shouldn't work. You shouldn't be able to send the 1940 120,000 people all over the country to every single place and try to literally touch every single of 130 million Americans. And yet it almost does work, which is the really surprising part.
Well, let's talk about 1940 then, because that was the most recent one that you were able to see. Because it's 75 years, and then this data becomes publicly available. Is that the threshold?
It's 72 years.
72.
Yes, the census.
They've got to make it as just random as humanly possible. But so you were able to get a hold of this trove of data from 1940 as the most recent one available.
Yeah, I started with 1940 in part because at the time I was writing this book, it was the most recently available. The Census Bureau is very concerned about confidentiality for good reason. They want to make sure that people feel like they can report their information without their neighbors or other people taking this information, which might be sometimes very sensitive. And so it is held in complete confidentiality for 72 years, or at least it's supposed to. And I started there because anyone who's doing their own family history is going to start there as well. But then the 1950 census has, as of April 2022, become available, so folks can now continue to look for history in those materials. But 1940 was also significant in its own right. It's a moment at which we first see the federal government start to be interested in things like how much income a person makes in the census. And that's because the government, big business, and labor are all interested in trying to figure out how much people make so they can figure out how big their markets are, so they can think about the standard of living of workers and how they can try to improve those things. The government is for the first time starting to think about the economic lives of ordinary individuals as something that it is responsible for, which prior to that had not been a thing that the census cared about or that the government was particularly responsible for.
And so I guess let's also set the historical context for this time, right? FDR is seeking a third term. The U.S. is about to enter World War II, and the country's still recovering from the Great Depression. All of these things that paint a picture of what this data represents. I mean, how did that historical context inform a lot of what you studied?
Yeah, I talk about the census as an operation that is shrouded in cloaks of boringness, like many of these constant systems. And yet there's a lot of drama in this when you start to look at how this count unfolds. In the midst of Roosevelt's reelection, we see Republicans try to take this as a moment to win some political points. And so they launch a very strenuous attack on including this income question and are able to drum up some really substantial support. I can kind of see the letters of people coming in, including one Indiana woman identifying herself as a housewife who talked about imagining this census enumerator coming to her door. And she said she made a little drawing on her letter that said, "I've got a pair of brass toes ready for the enumerator." And she imagines herself kicking this enumerator in the butt out the door. So there's political concern about invasions of privacy and about this new income question. And then to your point about entering World War II, that starts to really powerfully shape what is happening in the Census Bureau as they start to see that their resources are going to be drawn down as the U.S. enters the war, and they start to try and figure out ways that they can contribute to that war effort to really terrible results.
Well, they now have data on who's a Japanese American. So can you just talk about what the role that the census played in the internment of the Japanese?
Right. So I think about this story in part through the life of Iwao Moriyama, who is a Japanese-American Census Bureau official. He's working in the vital statistics operation. He has a brother who's living in Japan. His parents are Japanese-American living in San Francisco. And he, writing about this, is talking about what it's like to be in the Census Bureau, recognizing how crucial Census Bureau information is to making possible the entire war effort. Now, some of that is because in order to run the arsenal of democracy, all of these industries that rely on American workers, Roosevelt says they have to be citizens. But most people don't have proof of citizenship in 1940. The Social Security card is at most 3 years old in 1940. Many people don't have birth certificates. So they turn to the census and say, could you provide me a certified record that somebody thought I was a citizen in 1940? And they start producing all of these certified records as the only proof of citizenship to allow them to get jobs. So these are hundreds and thousands of these requests that are being processed. While the Bureau is doing this, it's also trying to count people and produce its statistics that it's supposed to produce from the 1940 census. And in the midst of all this, it says, we want to contribute to this war effort. We're going to produce special tabulations at very small levels where all Japanese Americans can be found on the West Coast. And so when the Roosevelt administration, operating out of fears that are really unfounded, there's no evidence at all that Japanese Americans are involved in any way in sabotage or are real threats, decides that they're going to remove all Japanese Americans from the West Coast. They end up relying on the census data information to direct that activity.
That is an especially dark usage of some of this data, and I think echoes what we saw in modern times. A little bit of what the Trump administration was trying to do with the census was to zero in on who was here illegally and who was, trying to target Latino communities in this country. and that has been, I mean, I'm curious about your what you found throughout history. Has that emphasis changed from administration to administration, targeting specific groups with the census and changing questions on it maybe to achieve outcomes that target minority groups?
Right. Well, so one thing I'll say about that, we certainly do see the way in which, for instance, before the census questions in 1940 start thinking about economic issues, throughout the 1870s through to the 1920s, much of the census was devoted to questions about where a person and their parents were born. And those were questions that the Congress put into these as they, from 1870 through 1920, 1929, were involved in these heavy debates about the degree to which immigration to the United States should be allowed. And we see from 1870 to 1920, all these laws passed to limit immigration, first from Asia and then from outside of the Western Hemisphere entirely, almost entirely. And so that's a way in which the census drives and supports these debates about who is an American and who should be allowed in. But the other thing I should say, because it has to do with what you're talking about in terms of the Trump administration, is that the story about Japanese incarceration, we need to tell it because it's important to think about how this information can be weaponized, but it's equally important to recognize that the Bureau and the laws changed in response to these kinds of weaponizations. These confidentiality protections have been put in place, have been reestablished to protect individuals from having their information surfaced. Similarly, special procedures have been put in place to try and make it so that it's harder to get fine-grained data about vulnerable populations. And I say that because one of the great fears, one of the things that happened with the Trump administration was by even telling the story, raising the idea of a citizenship question, one can try to drive down participation, decrease trust. And that has its own cost, because if people aren't counted, if their communities aren't counted, they don't get representation, their status is not recognized, and they can't get the resources and the attention that they need.
Well, it's good those guardrails are in place. I'm blanking on it, but it seems like that, you know, that did that not end up happening? What actually ended up happening with the Trump administration's effort on that front? They weren't able to do it, right?
Yeah, it was they kept trying in some ways, but the first key moment that happened was, having been sued and brought ultimately to the Supreme Court, it became clear that while the Department of Commerce claimed that the Department of Justice had asked for this question so that they could enforce the Voting Rights Act, it became clear they had made that up. That in fact it had gone the other way around. They decided ahead of time they wanted this, probably because it would be seen as a way to drive down participation from certain groups. And the Supreme Court said, look, you can't just make up reasons for this. That is in fact not legal. But it also did sound a little bit like the Chief Justice invited them to say the real reason, that if you just give us the real reason, which is you want to drive down participation, that might be fine, but you can't just make up a reason. We were saved to a great degree by a printing deadline. The Census Bureau needed to print a whole bunch of pieces of paper with all the questions on it, and there was not enough time to make that printing deadline while also continuing to appeal the census. So we were saved the citizenship question in large part because of these strange little logistical issues.
Gotcha. All right. Well, that's bureaucracy turning in our favor, I guess, here. I was curious too. You wrote about how during this 1940 period, a lot of the way that the census was taken was through kind of households being at the center of the census, and there's a lot of assumptions made in those instances. The man is the head of the household. They have a spouse. That spouse is a woman. Queer history in this country has a lot of gaps, but my guess is that this kind of data is reflective of those gaps.
Mm-hmm. We often forget that the way the census works is that it assumes people live, as you said, in a household, that they live in a family of some sort. It's not ultimately a count of individuals. It rather is a count of how people, in order to count, you have to fit into a family. And then the people who make those questions have certain assumptions about what that family looks like. One of the neat things, though, about being able to dig into all of the individual data and why looking back at these records is so revealing, is that you realize lots of people don't fit in that simple kind of household, but they still do get counted in one way or another. And so for me, one of the things that was particularly interesting was thinking about how this label called the partner was often used as a way to get people to fit, to make them count, to put them into a household. And it didn't mean necessarily the way partner means a romantic relationship to us today, although it might in some occasions. But it was used in all these different ways, in Hawaii, in the colonies, when Hawaii was still a territory, in obviously queer communities, in other places in which people just didn't fit into this ideal of what a family should look like. And it turns out there's people like that all over the United States whose stories can be told if we just are willing to dig through all of this material.
Gotcha. And I mean, would you also say that some of those assumptions kind of reproduced certain class dynamics that often were more favorable to white people, that kind of family that you describe? Without the deeper digging, though, you see how history and the data that's used to inform our historical understanding is based on a series of assumptions that are not scientific or completely devoid of politics. They're informed by the politics and the beliefs of the time.
Yeah, that's such an important point. These seemingly objective facts that look like they just are kind of descending from this apparatus have infused into them this politics. You can think of the census as like an infrastructure of identities. It provides the acceptable categories. It produces these tables showing us what America looks like according to those categories. But then as a result, it can limit our sense of who's actually there, who actually counts. So the partner was for instance, this category, this label that allowed people to be counted. But then when the actual 1940 census statistics were published, there were no partners. All those folks were then moved over and stuck, regardless of how they might be identified by their enumerator, they are all stuck in this large group of lodgers. And so there's a massive queer history and a massive history of people who are in marginal positions and marginal places that get kind of just shunted into a big bucket where they can reside in the statistics, but we lose them from this national story, at least until now. That's part of the thing I'm trying to do in this book.
Well, it really is a great history of the census, and important to understand how we collect our population data from the outside of this country to now. Dan Bouk, chair of the Department of History at Colgate University and author of Democracy's Data, The Hidden Stories in the U.S. Census and How to Read Them. Dan, thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure.
Of course. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by Akela Lacy, who will discuss the efforts to impeach Larry Krasner in Pennsylvania. Be right back. We are back, and we are joined now by Akela Lacy, politics reporter at The Intercept, who has been writing for really years on the sabotage and now impeachment efforts against Philadelphia DA Larry Krasner. Akela, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Emma. Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too. So yesterday, Republicans in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives filed articles of impeachment against Larry Krasner. This is apparently their new favorite tactic. I think, what was it? They tried to impeach the governor because of just COVID generally, right? Or they spoke about it at least. That seems to be something they're returning to. But here they've officially filed impeachment articles.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. They've been, threatening this for weeks at this point. People were going back and forth on whether or not a vote would actually happen because, as of today, the state house is adjourned until after Election Day. So, the fact that the impeachment efforts were being led by the person in the state Republican caucus who chairs their House campaign arm, among some of the other narratives around this, made it clear that this was part of their tactic ahead of Election Day. So that's some of the backdrop here. But yeah, they introduced the articles yesterday, along with a slew of other bills that have been introduced this week that would limit the prosecutorial authority of the district attorney's office in varying ways. So like appointing a special prosecutor who wouldn't be elected and who would be able to, in theory, prosecute some of the crimes that Krasner's opponents say that he's not addressing. So they're kind of throwing a lot of things. They were throwing a lot of things at the wall to see what stuck.
None of this is impeachable. Just to say this plainly, right? Just because you have a policy difference between the Philadelphia DA and what you would want as Republican tough-on-crimers, what is the underpinning, if any, that of these claims?
So there's not. This is one thing that sort of encapsulates the point that you're making is the report that the House Select Committee on Law and Order, their second interim report they released on Monday, which people were expecting them to recommend impeachment, based on, what it was unclear. But the report actually didn't make any recommendations. It said that the investigation of Krasner's office would continue indefinitely. It had a whole section demonstrating what it claimed was a causal relationship between Krasner's policies and an increase in homicides that relied mostly on a study by a former Republican district attorney and an adjunct fellow at the Manhattan Institute that was widely panned by professors and criminologists and sociologists across the board as having issues with methodology, basic factual errors, and being clearly politically motivated. So the person, one of the leaders of the committee who introduced the articles of impeachment yesterday quoted this article in his comments. That's what they're basing this off of. And they're, it's really interesting because the tactic here is trying to draw on people's fears where there is a certain logic that you could potentially make, arguing that if somebody is going to focus more on certain crimes, on not prosecuting, nonviolent offenses, and then you see a spike in crime, people are likely to, agree with that argument just based on sort of pure logic and some of the fear that comes along with some of the narratives that we've been seeing around, the homicide spike in 2020 and in 2021. But when you actually look at the facts and people are talking about using peer-reviewed evidence and research on this, there's no evidence that there's a causal relationship between these policies and crimes. And the flip side of that is that counties that have crime district attorneys have seen similar spikes, if not larger spikes, in homicides over the same time period with no sort of, similar focus on their offices. There's actually a district attorney in Pennsylvania right now, in Somerset County, who was just barred because he was charged with assaulting his wife, beating her in the head on a FaceTime. And there's been no, such similar efforts to look into his office. He will hold that office until the election, even though there's nobody technically, occupying that office in Pennsylvania. So, that just sort of underscores, that the real motives here.
No impeachment for that, even though that's a clear crime with video evidence. But what's crazy, too, is that, and I guess not crazy if you understand Republicans, is that they have undercut Larry Krasner's authority to go after gun crimes. And a lot of some of the increases that they describe, at least Krasner characterizes it as a result of just gun crime, which he did want to go after. He just wasn't trying to criminalize poverty in the city of Philadelphia. So talk about that starting in 2019, if you could, their efforts to strip his office of the authority to do its job on that front. Basically, and I think this is one of the more under-discussed stories in the country. We saw it with the Chesa Boudin recall too. Local police and other officials who are actively trying to sabotage efforts by progressive district attorneys and then turn around and blame them for crime.
Yeah. So, shortly after Krasner took office in 2018, the House quietly adopted this bill that would give concurrent jurisdiction to the state attorney general for certain gun crimes in Philadelphia. This made Philadelphia the only county in the state where this would be the case. And it effectively, gave the state attorney general, Josh Shapiro, who's currently running for governor of Pennsylvania, the power to take over some of these gun crimes from Krasner. The messaging behind this was that, he wasn't doing his job. Somebody else needed to step in and do it for him. So that passed. It was signed into law by the Democratic governor at the time. It didn't get a lot of attention until a few months later. Protesters in Philadelphia, including one organizer who was later elected to the state house and has been, critical of Krasner, but one of his supporters, they approached AG Shapiro at Netroots Nation and interrupted, a panel that he was on and asked him about this bill and got him on the spot to say that he would support its repeal. That was a major development in this bill. It ended up, being. It expired. He didn't use it when it was in effect. But it set up, what has been sort of a butting of heads between the AG and the DA's office. They do have to cooperate with each other on a lot of things. And to their credit, I think they both have been sort of working against this perception that they're trying to undermine one another. But at the end of the day, they have been pit against one another. So this also came up when Krasner argued that the death penalty should be unconstitutional in front of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. This was another arena where Shapiro came out and opposed him and said that would have been an overreach of the bench. Fast forward, Shapiro, we reported that later, I think this was in 2019, Shapiro's office had, staffers from Shapiro's office had been emailing with reporters or emailing about stories by the Philadelphia Inquirer and referencing conversations with reporters about, being more critical of his office's approach to prosecuting gun crimes, saying that they weren't answering the right questions. And despite, a statistic in an Inquirer story that noted that his gun prosecutions had been slightly up over predecessors, but what kinds of prosecutions, that they weren't asking the right questions. So seeing, opposition from him from the AG's office there, they obviously denied, having any sort of role in that. But fast forward to today, middle of the election, Shapiro has been, kind of leaning into the GOP attacks on crime, running as somebody who, has a support of law enforcement, will, fight for safe communities, which is all, important in a state like Pennsylvania. But at the end of the day, he has stayed away, notably from the fight in the state that will determine the future of criminal justice reform and prosecutorial policy in a lot of ways. Similarly, the Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman's campaign has been asked about this. They have, said that they agree with Krasner on certain things and disagree on others, and they feel like, the police need to feel more supported. So this is an issue that, national Democrats in the state have been national Democrats and then at the state level have been sort of dancing around, and they feel like it's a toxic issue. So they're not leaning in or trying to sway what's going to happen, which in a campaign cycle is not necessarily surprising.
Yeah, but at the same time, it is a frustrating dynamic that Democrats don't seem to really have a a narrative around crime to combat what Republicans are putting out there, other than kicking the left and distancing themselves from the left. And so Krasner's a bit on an island at this point, despite his election to being the Philly DA being so historic, given some of his more progressive stances on criminal justice reform.
Yeah, I mean, this is the problem in a lot of states right now, obviously, and something that I think about a lot. We talk about a lot at the Intercept. Like it's easier to lean in and try to out tough on crime the GOP than to make an analytical or, intellectual argument that those policies don't work. And I think Democrats have made the calculation that that's too difficult to do, too difficult to communicate to voters without, appreciating the cost, the long-term cost, which is not only returning to, failed policies and increasing harm, especially for poor Black and brown people, but also turning off voters who came out for these policies in elections outside of Philadelphia, in Chicago, in St. Louis, in LA, where criminal justice reform actually energized parts of the base that Democrats, had lost, going back to 2016. I think they made the calculation that that's less important than winning over some of the more moderate voters who might be, more susceptible to some of these talking points on crime.
Well, Akela Lacy, politics reporter at The Intercept. You can read her work over at The Intercept about topics like this, among many other things. But Akela's been following this story about Krasner for a few years at this point. So check out her work over there. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Emma.
Of course. All right, folks, we are going to wrap up the first hour of this program and then head into the fun half, I think, where we'll be taking your calls and reading your IMs.
It's going to be super fun.
Yeah. I am seeing some IMs here about, maybe we'll just talk about this now really, really quickly, because I'm sure we're going to get more IMs about it. I responded to Cenk Uygur on Twitter yesterday because he said that he was going to be voting for Caruso over Bass in the mayoral election. And I just wanted to respond to him publicly because I knew we'd get questions about it today. And, he's someone I respect. A huge reason I'm in this industry is because I love Cenk and he gave me my first shot. And so we're friends. And we have a disagreement on this point. Caruso is a former Republican billionaire who is a real estate tycoon. And I am shocked just that's his decision, because I don't think you can really say it's a vote in favor of the working class or the poor. And
no, it's a vote to shake it up and against the status quo. And
but that is the limit of anti-establishment politics,
Yep.
right? Which is that we don't need to. That's just like the limit of anti-establishment politics here, because I just feel like, that's kind of what Jimmy Dore was saying.
Well, it's the thing is, like, look, if I don't vote shame, so I don't shame all the people who decide to vote for milquetoast Democrats, and I also don't not vote shame. I think if you don't want to vote for a centrist Democrat, whatever. I'm not going to waste my time. I think you, on balance, should vote offensively. That's just my take.
Yeah.
But it's different when you're saying, I'm actually voting for this other thing. And it's not just the Karen Bass stinks. And I don't know a whole lot about Karen Bass.
She stinks, but in comparison to the former Republican billionaire who's also a real estate tycoon, she stinks a little bit less.
Exactly. And that's the sort of thing is just don't say anything. Just because, and it's one thing, I don't care if you vote, but when you go public with it and you've basically made your person, yourself, synonymous with the progressive left, all of a sudden you get headlines now where, look at the left is endorsing this guy who I don't think the left has any business endorsing.
It's like saying Kamala Harris. It's like if Kamala Harris and Michael Bloomberg were the two final candidates in the 2020 election, being like, I'm voting for Michael Bloomberg because he's outside of the Democratic establishment.
Yeah,
but
it's
he's
just-
also a billionaire, and he's also... There's no one more establishment than billionaires. They literally construct an economic system that exploits working people. And especially in cities like Los Angeles, real estate billionaires are some of the people that are going to exacerbate problems of houselessness, because housing is the problem.
Yeah.
That's the center of this.
And I don't mean to be like too cynical about this, but I've like, as someone who's worked for the city, like all city, most if not all city elected officials are bad in one way or another. Karen Bass was like a garden variety congressperson when she was in the House, and to be the mayor of Los Angeles or the mayor of New York City, I would say maybe if I had to wager, there are like 3 okay mayors in the country. Chokwe Lumumba in Jackson, Mississippi, Randall Woodfin in Birmingham, Alabama, and Michelle Wu in Boston. That's basically it. Like,
kind of, yeah.
If you are a mayor of a city like Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Fry, mayor of Portland, Ted Wheeler, mayor of Los Angeles, Garcetti, or mayor of New York, Eric Adams, what you have to do is you have to love cops more than you love anybody else, and you have to want to literally bulldoze where homeless people live. That's the
Well
bar
said.
you have to clear, and
that's what Caruso is basically. He has been when asked about what he's going to do about like the metro and about public transport, it's just more cops to crack down on homeless people.
Basically your answer to that is like how many more cops are you willing to shovel into all these problems, and how many more homeless people are you willing to shovel out? And frankly, Caruso wants to do more of that. That's just the difference. So I'm not saying Karen Bass is this great politician or would be a great mayor for LA. She would just be better than Rick Caruso.
It's a harm reduction vote, yeah, in my opinion. So I just wanted to get that out of the way because I know we're getting some IMs about it, and
we side with Bernie on that.
Yes, and Bernie Sanders is going to stump for Karen Bass today. So for me, that says it all about that. And if I'm in California, if I'm in LA, the vote for me is pretty clear on that front.
Yep.
All right, but with that said, let's bring in our guys. Brandon Sutton, Matt Binder. Hello. Oh. There we go. Look at that. What's up, guys?
Hello.
Got the boys today.
Hey.
Yeah.
The boys are back in town.
Boys today.
And Jimmy Dore already just came up casually, so then we'll get to do a deep dive into your investigation, Matt Binder, in the fun
I'm excited
half.
for that.
That would be fun.
Right. That was very random. Like it happened just before I was going live on Tuesday, and I was like, this is weird, and I quickly looked into it, and I was like, this is even weirder than I thought.
Yeah, right. So, well, we'll just tease it. We won't give away what Matt Binder found, but what's happening over on Scam Economy and Doomed?
So on Doomed on Tuesday, I spoke with Anna Merlin. She's a reporter over at Vice's Motherboard, and we did a deep dive into the Alex Jones trials and looked at how people have been defending him and claiming that, you can't say anything about events anymore, as if, that's literally the argument I've seen. Like who said that? The woman from The Hill. What was her name? The Hill Rising.
Jasinski or Emily Jasinski?
No, she's not on the show anymore. They booted her, I think.
Crystal Ball?
Katie Halper?
No, neither of those. Neither of
those. Kim Iverson?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, Kim Ivermectin, right. That's her name, yeah. She was one of those people pushing that, like the difference between someone saying something about her and Alex Jones on Sandy Hook because she was going to file a defamation lawsuit against the Humanist Report.
Yeah,
for saying she was like anti-trans or whatever.
Can I just say I just want to jump into that because I went pretty hard on her for that, saying I tagged Ryan Grimm, Robbie Soev, and Alemi Lurin and said, tell management to fire this person, and she's no longer there anymore. And I think that's an improvement.
Participating in cancel culture.
I mean, hey,
you
can't
to
say
sue somebody
anymore.
Yeah, exactly. You can't even say I want to sue this person for criticizing me. Yeah, that gets you canceled in my book. I'm coming with the full cancel culture if you threaten to sue.
Well,
somebody.
I know she can't. This is a defensive cancellation. She attempted to cancel one of our allies at the Humanist Report, and then so we returned return.
That's
with
what you
defense.
get.
It was a
Right.
preemptive cancellation. We're fighting back with our cancellation.
Right, those are the culture wars, baby.
Hell yeah!
Well, anyway, we took on people who argue that and how no, in fact, Alex Jones actually went after actual individuals, parents of the Sandy Hook children, and defamed them. And we tackle a bunch of these things. So check that out, youtube.com/Matt Binder, doomedcast.com. And then usually Scam Economy we beat tonight. I recorded a great interview with two reporters from Fast Company who did a deep dive into the Bored Ape Yacht Club parent company, Yuga Labs, got interviews with them. We really spoke in depth about that company and what they've been doing. And there was a problem with the file when I recorded it. So we have to re-record it. Yes, I know. We have to re-record it. That's all going to happen. It's happening. The re-recording is happening tonight, but that means the show won't be ready tonight. So Scam Economy will be tomorrow around 9 p.m. Eastern time at scameconomy.com. I'll try to upload the podcast version earlier if I can, but the YouTube one will be at youtube.com/Matt Binder tomorrow night, followed by the post show where I take call-ins and stuff.
Awesome. All right. Well, Brandon, hello, friend. What's happening over on the
New
Discourse?
episode of The Discourse. We talk about Kanye. We talk about Alex Jones. We talk about the Supreme Court looking at immunity for online platforms for the things that are posted on them. And we talk about people posting crimes online crimes. So, it's very related to what Matt Binder has been talking about and probably we're going to be talking about today. But, very happy to have something out for the fans this week. The fans and haters alike.
Provide them with the content.
The haters just waiting on the podcast to hit the feed.
It's like what's his face? Hobson said, "I don't have haters. I just have fans in denial."
Wow, I haven't thought about Hobson since high school, but
yeah, you can't say anything anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I guess not.
His mind was too weird.
I couldn't even tell you what he looked like. I just remember his album covers, I guess, a little bit. But anyway, is he good? I can't tell. This is I don't know.
I have no idea who you're talking about.
Oh, okay.
Actually.
He's a rapper.
No. It's all right. So everything's all right.
Okay. All right. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it. All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
And the alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflakes has what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs that look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them. Snowflake says what?
What?
Snowflake says what? A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck 'em, fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you. And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back. I am turning off the voicemail so people can call in. 646-257-3920. What's up, guys? Brandon, you were saying something and I cut you off, but that was just chit chat.
No, it's good. My mouth was really dry, so I'm glad I was able to just take a little pause there. And sometimes I gotta wait for myself.
Gotta hydrate. You gotta hydrate.
Gotta hydrate. People think you don't have to, but you have to hydrate.
I have heard such recommendations before.
This is not medical advice, but you have to hydrate.
Mac Leck Dorvoy says, "What do you guys like about Woodfin? I'm just outside Birmingham and have heard little about him, honestly." Woodfin? I don't know.
Randall Woodfin, the mayor of Birmingham. He was endorsed by Bernie, and he's probably just in terms of his policy prescriptions. I don't know a whole lot about what he's done as mayor, but especially his platform, he was much more progressive than truly like
that's
any
the
other
Birmingham
mayors
guy
in the South.
Yeah.
Like and even relative to any Northeast or West Coast so-called progressive cities, like. Portland is ostensibly one of the most progressive cities in the country, and it's run by a guy who literally is like a servant to his police department.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to even think about this in terms of like an individual that's the best, because it doesn't really tell you that much. Like, look at Chokwe Lumumba. Like, you have a great individual and even a movement local to the city, and it's still really not enough because the way the
rest
federal,
of the state,
the state and federal governments are stacked against it. Like, so you really need a broader
even
movement to support all those folks.
De Blasio was like, ran on somewhat of a progressive platform,
paid leave,
and accomplished some of those things,
right?
But ultimately, like. You don't control the cops.
And they ended up basically doxing his daughter, and then he still had to come bend the knee.
That was, I think, the biggest problem for him was that he couldn't toe that line between being the ultimate cop respecter and also being a so-called progressive on police brutality.
Right.
He still would be obsequious to them in every chance they got, but then at a police officer funeral, all of them turned their back on him.
Yeah.
At the reception.
I haven't really been keeping track of what he's been doing, but apparently most recently he was speaking at a climate change event, hosted by Bloomberg, boo, in the Netherlands, talking about how like systemic racism and, climate change are leading to like, increases in flooding in areas that predominantly affect, people of color and poor people. So, I guess that's something.
The host of that venue kind of negates anything said at said venue.
And he dyed his hair. Apparently, allegedly.
I also think like the people that are in charge of like addressing climate change, like when you like point out like the negative equity effects of it, I don't know if that's necessarily persuasive to like the people that actually rule the economy.
Yeah.
I mean, like you guys were saying too, like the mayor is not an effective level to combat climate change at. I think that's something that people just have to get into their heads. It's not an excuse to not like on a personal level take any, I don't want to say take any responsibility, but just, don't burn trash, obviously, not to take a controversial standpoint on it, but don't burn trash, but
I gotta stop
burn
that.
Flags, not trash.
It's just a habit I can't get out of.
Eventually you have to break it though. I know we all love to, but you got to break it. I think we got to get out of our heads the idea that you can fight climate change at the local level or even at the national level, because, for all of our talk about like climate change being a priority, like it precludes, it being true if we're always at a constant state of like war readiness, because it just takes international cohesion to like truly fight such a, high level threat.
I'm just a little bit distracted by Bradley throwing in the allegedly when saying that Bill de Blasio dyed his hair.
Oh yeah, no.
No, it just grew back with the original color, man. That's
It's only reports. We can't verify it.
Oh God, what is it, like jet black?
Yeah, it's like he was at an event. He just has like jet black hair now.
Oh my God, that
Yeah.
is so unsettling. And why would he do this now? That's totally presidential run stuff, like when Biden got that facelift.
Yeah, or maybe he's just kind of like, I can let it out.
We're breaking news. We're breaking news, baby.
Folks, ...
I like to believe that, you know, it's not a situation of dying. Maybe this is like how when some people saw the dress was like blue and black and some people saw it was like white and gold. You know, it's just going to be an optical illusion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping for that as well. Eddie Munster says, Emma, preview Ravens at Bucks tonight. Tune into ESVN, youtube.com/ESVN show. ESVN OT will be on there at 4 p.m. ESVN show.
Go Ravens.
I mean, I always root for the Ravens unless they're facing the Giants, but I love the Ravens.
Emma would never root for the Ravens over the Bucks.
No, are you kidding me? It's like my favorite player in the NFL versus my least favorite player in the NFL. Carly Shea here. We definitely need better candidates all around in the Pacific Northwest. They're mostly just buffers for the lunatic right these days. Godcat says, hope that little gift worked out for you, Matt. Maybe I'll swing by the Gowanus Canal in the spring, take the crew to dinner.
Godcat, I had to pass your gift on to somebody who didn't have to do a live show and then fly out. And that's all I'll say about that.
Okay,
So,
okay.
I appreciate it, but yeah, I wasn't in a state to, do that.
I mean, it sounds like it's not pot because you would have been fine.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't pot.
Oh my God! Tell me later. Okay. Calling from a 434 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Yeah, hey guys, this is Ben from Virginia. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Ben, we can hear you. Great.
Okay, great. Hey, Emma, Matt, Brandon, and Bradley. I really enjoyed the show yesterday, and I had more of a kind of a specific question for Sam as a dad, but I often think of questions for you guys, the younger crew, and I just kind of wanted
Bender's
to know.
a dad.
I am. What's that?
Bender is a dad.
I'm a dad.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm so sorry, Matt. I didn't know that. Boy
It's
or
all
girl?
good.
How old?
I got both. I got a boy and a girl, 7 and 3.
Flexing.
Oh man, nice.
Dad guy.
Okay. Well, then I'll go ahead and ask my Sam question because, and I appreciate y'all's perspective as just a younger crowd. How would you all suggest, or how do you think it's best to relate to, I guess basically conservatives in the family? And I know that's kind of like maybe like a typical question, but my daughter's like 9 months old now, but I do just think a lot about there are days when I figure she'll be asking me something, at some point, and I'll have to be like, well, that's because Grandma and Grandpa are monsters, and we just don't talk about that, but that's not really,
For a second, I thought you were going to say
when I think about it.
For a second, I thought you were going to say the 9-month-old was the conservative in the family and how to talk to her about it.
No. I mean, based on her habits, she's fairly liberal right now about everything. So
right, yeah. It seems like most children are, in fact, like that. They seem to, play with kids no matter what they look like, what color their skin is, and they just normally are like that. And then all of a sudden, somewhere down the line, things go wrong, I guess. If you're from a family where that sort of ideology and belief system sort of sets in. I mean, I'm lucky in the sense that my family is either liberal or apolitical, really. And when I mean apolitical, like when they do vote, they still go out and vote for the politically the left candidate, whoever that may be. They just don't partake in like what's going on outside of voting and stuff. It's difficult. It depends how far gone they are. Like if we're just talking about someone again who just goes out and votes for Trump and comes home and never brings up politics. I mean, it's not the end of the world. And it sucks they do that, but you could still have a relationship with them. If you have a family member who's spurting out QAnon nonsense and calling every other person a groomer, then you're going to have problems. You can't really associate that person with your children, I would say.
Right. Well, we basically got like a Fox granddad, who we like taught how to use YouTube on his phone. So it's like Tucker Carlson 24/7 now.
I would say like if you care about them having a relationship, to say, listen, none of this comes up around the kids. You just don't do it. If you want to see your children, if you want a relationship with your grandchildren, I want none of this spoken about, because I'm not raising my children this way. And if you want to continue to see your grandchildren and have a good relationship, you will listen to my rules as their parent.
Daddy Bender.
Right. Yeah, I've thought about that. I caught the tail end of Matt Leck's Left Reckoning a couple nights ago, where they were talking with a guy that was just saying, you kind of have to find common ground with folks. And for me, at least with most of my family members who are of that persuasion, it just turns into like, we just don't talk about politics. It's kind of, we just don't reference it. That's the common ground.
Right. That common, that sounds like a more realistic common ground than what I think some people mean in terms of like, see it from their side and come to some middle ground agreement. And no, that's not how it works. I think, if you do care about this family member and having a relationship with them, just set the rules that there's no talking about it, especially if we're talking about your kids. Just say, this is non-negotiable, nothing around my kids. And, if you do not listen to this, then I'm sorry, I can't keep bringing them here because I don't approve of it.
All right. Appreciate the call, Ben. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Left is best.
Left
Take
is
care.
best.
I would say just, child agnostic, not, agnostic about children, but agnostic about, in terms of whether you have them or
childless.
not. Regardless of whether a child's in the situation or not, I would say if you care about the people in your family, we're just at that point where like right-wing media has, in the capacity a lot more than it used to lead people down very dark pathways. And, it might not be enough to leave these things in the dark and like, well, let's not talk about them in the light because like, I don't want to bring this in front of my kid because, Tucker Carlson on YouTube becomes like Stu Peters on whatever Stu Peters network is next day, or like OAAN or a lot of these other like more radical shows. And, I think a lot of people want to believe that some of the people in their lives who have always been a little conservative are like stagnant in their conservatism. But like they still have the capacity to be radicalized. I bet a lot of people were surprised to see their family member at January 6th or at a Unite the Right rally, because last time they talked, they were just kind of like a George W. Bush guy, right? And whatever.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's not static. They have immense capacity to be radicalized, and it's almost more likely in this current environment than it was previously. Maybe that's not true, but I just feel like, especially if you're young, it's just so easy to go down a wormhole online, which is just like a less articulate way of kind of what you just said, Brandon. But let's do a clip really quick, if we could. Brian Kilmeade, I think let's start with this. So the entire conservative media operation, speaking of them, has jumped on John Fetterman's stroke symptoms as a way to discredit him as a candidate for the Senate, and polls have narrowed significantly since earlier on in this race, where Fetterman had a comfortable lead. Brian Kilmeade on Fox and Friends spoke about Fetterman's debate performance, where he kind of struggled because, as he's been open about, he has some auditory processing stuff that he's still working through, and that will improve. He's on track given the stroke that he suffered. And yet this has now been kind of a foothold for Republicans to attack him on, essentially saying that he's unfit for the job, as they also support, Herschel Walker, who's just like this, didn't suffer a stroke and isn't going to be on a steady improvement track, or, Donald Trump, who just has a alleged personality disorder and who's actually just insane. They are still fine with that kind of person. Fetterman, Kilmeade says, it's insulting to the rest of the Senate to think that he can do this job.
They bring up something else. Now they're bringing up Barack Obama, Joe Biden, yesterday Dave Matthews. So they're going to try to soften the blow and make him seem like a sympathetic figure from here on in. I just say this to the people of Pennsylvania. The person you hire, not only are his views seemingly different than what Pennsylvania is, they got to be able to do the job. What an insult it is to people who are in the Senate.
Yeah,
to
see, pause
do
it.
the job.
But like that thing where, regardless of the views are, like if it was true that Fetterman's positions were different than Pennsylvania's, they would be talking about that and not this secondary thing.
Well, they're trying to say crime, right? They've been hitting him on crime, and then he has tattoos, so that means that he's in with the
like
criminals.
fracking, which is the Chiron here.
But everything else,
his stance, which Oz has also done on fracking, by the way.
right? But all right, keep.
Also, though, I should point out the three great presidents: Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Dave Matthews.
Oh, right. I know. All with equal.
The Mount Rushmore.
Equal influence. I thought Dave Matthews was from Virginia. What is this about?
He's, I think, just like a standard liberal guy. Like,
okay,
like a John Legend type guy.
Whew. Now we're in. Yeah. We have sealed the deal on Fetterman's victory.
We need to I was going to say we need to pause on that because if you just consign all DMB bros to the Democrats, that's a big win for Democrats.
That is a demographic shift,
That's a
baby.
previously apolitical group of dudes, and if they're all Democrats now, that's impressive.
Well, they do like weed, so I mean, if they want,
I mean, this is the soy boyification of white men in this country.
Man, I need to go revisit DMB.
Yesterday, Dave Matthews. So they're going to try to soften the blow and make him seem like a sympathetic figure from here on in. I just say this to the people of Pennsylvania. The person you hire, not only are his views seemingly different than what Pennsylvania is, they got to be able to do the job. What an insult it is to people who are in the Senate to think that you can do the job. You have committee hearings, you set policy, you have to answer constituents. What you hear is not what you say. That's why you have to read it. This is a job interview, and that's just it. If you go to a job interview and you say, I had a stroke 5 months ago, and you can't interact with that person, they will not hire you.
But here's...
That's illegal.
Tell that to the NLRB.
Yeah, Brian Kilmeade. So what you're advocating
Fox
for
News.
Is ableist discrimination. That's literally against the law. You're not allowed to discriminate against someone because they use auditory processing software. And yes, Brian Kilmeade, it's a total insult to the rest of the Senate. And frankly, we should kick out the other two senators that had strokes just this year.
Yeah, let's kick out Ben Ray Lujan of New Mexico and Chris Van Hollen of Maryland, who have also had strokes, because clearly they can't do that.
I mean, come on. Although, don't give them any ideas.
And also, just to say, Mark Kirk, the Republican senator from Illinois, he had a stroke, and Republican politicians and Democratic politicians alike were really not treating Fetterman this way.
Yeah, Britt, can you pull up this thing I just put in sound polls? This is a guy, Esoteric CD. He's like some sort. Oh, Jeff. Yeah. I really don't like this guy. I think he does stuff like this. A very cynical guy. But he posted this tweet about this same thing, trying to make the point about Mark Kirk. It says, I couldn't vote. First one says, I couldn't vote for Mark Kirk, the only Republican I'm ever likely to see in the Senate from Illinois, and a guy I genuinely liked for re-election because I doubted his fitness for office post-stroke. I am consistent here.
Oh, yeah?
This was his defense, by the way, just yesterday of him knocking John Fetterman as not being able to do his job in the Senate because of his stroke. Just to give it some more context there, yeah.
But whoops, here we go.
And then he said, if you go back to the tape in November 1st, 2016, mailed in my absentee vote today, wrote in McMullen for Prez, Kirk for Senate, plus GOP Palooka, who will get smushed by Danny Davis in Illinois Senate. So, I mean, maybe just search your own effing tweets.
Yeah, he's consistent in being lazy in his lives.
Being a moron.
Yeah.
And like McMullen for Press, I mean, this is like the type of thing you get from Never Trumpers. Like, just like still blatantly dishonest for partisan reasons, but like having different sort of strategic and frankly comfortability with some of the base.
Somehow it's smarmier and a little bit more sanctimonious though than just like actually dyed in the wool like Kool-Aid drinkers. Like
right.
I
prefer you just be. Yeah. Just be.
I find it's like more annoying and
just
more
be
insidious.
MAGA.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like. But apparently, though, Kilmeade's made it clear: people who have had strokes, no jobs for you. Sorry.
And like, I just think I think it's important to note that cognitively, my understanding is Fetterman is fine. Even if that wasn't the case, I gotta say, like, just being real, like, I'm voting for the person who themselves or their staff has the better position on the PRO Act. This is how adults vote. It's not based on like who performs the language better.
Yeah, this isn't American Ninja Warrior or like we're not casting the next Batman.
This is about power, and these politicians are just figureheads representing coalitions of power.
Like I absolutely agree. And like one of the things you constantly see is, who could do the job? And it doesn't look like Fetterman can do the job, they say. Well, what is the job? What are the 99% of the things that Kilmeade mentioned in that clip? That's actually like stuff that like aides and people who work for the senator do. What is the actual job? The job is to push forward policies and give votes to things that candidate believes in when they become the senator. So Fetterman's job and Oz's job, while both being the senator, their jobs are actually not going to be the same at all. Their jobs are going to be to accomplish very different things. So you have to look at Fetterman and Oz, and you have to say to yourself, do I want Fetterman to accomplish his job, his policies, his beliefs, or I want Oz to accomplish his completely separate job, which is his, policies and beliefs. And that's the job you're going to get when you vote for that person. So it's not just this job that like they go in and they're just like, serving people who come to their restaurant. You serve whoever comes in, doesn't matter anything about it. That's not the job here. They're going to have two very different jobs. And if you don't want Oz to do what, the Republicans and the broader GOP want, then you don't want him in there in that position to get his job done.
Yeah, the point I people have been making that very similar and I think correct point, Binder, and I've seen people like, well, the left is using this argument against Herschel Walker. Well, we're making that argument because Herschel Walker's positions are bad and he'd do bad things. Like, he's a bad candidate, and it's only exacerbated by his inability to communicate. But the thing about it is that we know that this is like the trajectory that Fetterman is on. He's getting better, and he just uses auditory processing software. And the idea that you could if he were deaf or if he were blind, would this argument be being made? Because it's basically analogous.
For me, I mean, I think the most ableist thing is to imply that just by nature of that, like even by nature of his stroke, that somehow makes Dr. Oz more fit. Absurd. Just by nature of not which is absurd. It's like that's why they have to make these arguments, because people have been doubting Dr. Oz's fitness not for any sort of like legitimate disability reasons, just from not living in the allegedly not living in the state, amongst his many gaffes, including the ones from the debate. And they're just trying to make this a sort of incredibly disrespectful argument that somehow John Fetterman's, in their eyes, lack of fitness makes Dr. Oz's lack of fitness look a little bit better by by contrast.
Right. I mean, it is, unfortunately, though, they had been like laying this groundwork for a while in conservative media, and it seems to be working as of now. I'm hoping that just because Shapiro is so far ahead of Mastriano at this point, that maybe it can buoy Fetterman to the finish line, but I am pretty concerned right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to draw heads or tails from polling at this point. I've seen polls that say Fetterman's still okay.
Yeah, I mean, people in Pennsylvania, are they really going to consider that debate if they were already considering Fetterman? That's the question. And from what I saw, local PA media, like the local online news outlets and papers, they were covering the debate much different than the national media. Like the national media was Fetterman clearly off his game. Yeah, and the local media was like, Fetterman stumbles as expected, but Oz doesn't come out well in the they were really Fetterman had a problem because we knew he was going to, but it wasn't like this big defeat. He just didn't perform well at a debate.
What you see is the difference in stakes. Like for people like Barry Weiss, who are just lying in support of basically the Republicans, you're only going to emphasize that. But for people who live in Pennsylvania, who are like, oh yeah, it might be actually nice to have a representative who is supportive of raising the minimum wage.
That's the thing. He didn't. I mean, that's what Dr. Oz said, that the essentially the market should determine whether the minimum wage is increased. And in Pennsylvania, it's the federal minimum. It's $7.25. People may not realize that, but that is the case, and that is unconscionable.
That's what I made at McDonald's in high high school.
It's unconscionable, and especially when you go over the border and to someplace like New Jersey or New York where it's higher. There's no reason that it should still be 725, and that's Dr. Oz's position. And just really quickly, Brandon, I just wanted to make this point. Like Barry Weiss or Olivia Nuzzi, who are making this case about how uncomfortable they are having to watch Dr. or Fetterman speak with dysplasia versus Dr. Oz. It just goes to show that the national media, as Matt, you were saying, they want this to be a pageant, and they want to have the kind of person and the kind of communicator that's going to provide some sort of like stewardship that looks good on TV. And for people that actually live in the state, that doesn't matter. And hopefully that's how voters feel.
I mean, just to jump on that point, Emma, I would even sort of go a little further. This is about the intersection of like working class people's healthcare and, the impacts of that on their lives. Because people went out, and I mean, people across the political spectrum in journalism went out of their way to pretend like Trump could speak normally for an hour straight. If you would listen to like the recaps of Trump's speeches from journalists and then actually like listen to those speeches, they're like night and day half the time, because he would go off on long rants about like showers. For me, I think it's like, a working class person, whether it's, a stroke, whether it's a heart attack, whether it's some sort of, other just like catastrophic accident, someone who's had, interactions with the healthcare system and who, with our healthcare system specifically as a result of having a catastrophic incident, I think that provides a unique insight that a lot of people who operate within just, traditional circles are uncomfortable with. They're uncomfortable with the idea that, it's recovering from a stroke becomes a sign of like, intellectual lack of capability for those people, where, if John Fetterman was a billionaire, people would probably be okay with it. A lot of these same people, because the implication wouldn't be that like, his interactions or his judgment based on these sort of things would be implicated because his wealth would insulate him from that. But for me, I think that experience is invaluable in somebody who's going to be in the Senate, somebody who, assuming they can, they are a fit for the job, which he seems to be, it just means that they have insight into like the terribleness that is our healthcare system, and they are going to be probably more willing to work on it.
And there's an avatar for that kind of slick and, I would say, unkind kind of doctor, or somebody who feels somebody who others have been talked down to about their health condition for a long period of time on the other side of that debate stage. And that is a wealthy guy from New Jersey who snidely and tries to subtly mock John Fetterman's health condition on the debate stage for his own professional gain. And I feel like people have an understanding of like, no, I mean, Fetterman's tried to hit this. This kind of person is why your health care is not taken care of. And it's because he's having his spokesperson say to the media, well, he had a stroke, maybe because he hasn't eaten a vegetable in his life or something like that. Yeah, the people are sick and tired of their healthcare outcomes, which are influenced by our dog-eat-dog, market-based healthcare system, created by that, in fact, spoken down to as if the outcomes that they that occur from that kind of system on their own bodies are a result of their own actions. It's not your fault. This is just the sickness that our society chooses to create. All right. With that said, let's just do this Candace Owens clip really quickly, and then we'll take some calls and read some IMs, because this was from yesterday. Here we go. So Candace Owens has been having a moment, whether she's at Kanye West's fashion show wearing a White Lives Matter shirt, or she is going further to demonize trans people than any of the other conservative influencers in her sphere. She's trying to continue to make a name for herself in this space. And
don't forget her providing her husband with the assist to dupe Kanye into buying Parler.
Yeah.
I forgot about that for a second.
I mean, the master stroke there.
Right. That's
ruin his
the
career
one
and then have him buy that you're like third tier conservative social network.
And I'd
Right,
imagine
that's being kind
so much,
too with third tier. That's
so
being
much
nice.
of his
liquidity.
wealth too is tied up in that like Adidas deal for those sneakers, and now that's gone away, and all he has is just this steaming turd of a investment in Parler. Good job, Kanye West.
Oh, and then he showed up at Skechers with a crew, like a film crew and stuff. With Skechers, people who watch Mad Men know it's a Jewish footwear
I did not know
company.
that. I didn't remember
Isn't
that.
that in Mad Men?
I don't know.
But yeah, wanting Skechers to take him on
Huh.
as a spokesperson.
Should have done
Skechers like
his research. Yeah.
I maybe he did do his research. Is the thing that concerns me.
He thought their slogan was "It's the SS." Thank you.
Yes, good. That was good. That was good. But anyway, so that's what her BFF is up to, and here she is speaking about how trans-affirming care is worse than what the Nazis did with experimentation. And I should remind you guys...
Interesting theme for her.
Yeah, she seems to go back to that a lot. I should remind you guys that one of the world's first trans clinics was a target of the Nazis. You can read about it in the Scientific American. Adolf Hitler was very interested and did exterminate queer people, homosexuals in general, and they were a target of his genocidal reign and many thousands of people died because of that. So this is completely counter-historical, but here she is.
So Matt Walsh is a Nazi. That's the idea, right? I thought it was actually the Nazis that were into experimentation. Pretty sure Hitler had a lot of experiments that were taking place. He experimented on twins. He experimented on children. So no, you are not on the right side of this issue. In fact, I would never, ever want somebody recording me supporting that. Radically supporting gender mutilation, gender reassignment surgery by another name. It is a stunning rebuke of our society that people don't recognize this as wrong. You know, it's incredible.
Who's she talking
that people can become such ideologues that they are.
So yeah, we just need to. So she's in London. Go back just a little. Like what is this? Some sort of like colorblind test that she's wearing, like with like the gray and the purple dots? Am I going crazy?
It is one of the ugliest shirts I've ever seen in my life. That's all I have to say about it. But it is. I don't understand.
It's just really weird that she's like just looking slightly off to this left if she's not actually talking to anybody. Like, remember that was it Michelle Malkin post State of the Union address?
No, not Michelle Malkin.
Bachmann. Oh my god.
Oh my god. For a second I was like, I don't remember that.
It's been a long time. Yeah, it reminded me of that. Just like she just seems even more like off kilter by like looking what is not at a person. I thought she was being interviewed by somebody.
Yeah, I think that's a teleprompter not being perfectly aligned with the camera eye line problem.
Yeah. All right. Well, her characterization of gender affirming care is experimentation, which once you just look into the actual healthcare behind that, undercuts her entire argument.
Yeah, exactly. Like the idea that there's genital mutilation going on for children is just basically false. Like the guidelines are for social transitioning, and then maybe something like puberty blockers for kids who have undergone social transitions and feel comfortable in their new gender sort of identification enough to not want to go through puberty of the other gender. Like these aren't mutilations. This is actually like care.
And the good news is that Candace Owens is at least consistent on the topic of medical experiments on people who are maybe marginalized, which is why she spoke out about the reports about migrants being experimented on with different healthcare, I guess, what was it, hysterectomies and things like that. I'm glad she spoke out about that. Oh, wait.
Oh, right.
Yeah, did not.
Is a stunning rebuke of our society that people don't recognize this as wrong. You know, it's incredible that people can become such ideologues that they are committed
real
to
quick.
this as a
You know who recognized it as wrong was, as Emma said earlier, Adolf Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
It's a cult and it's a religion, right? They wake up every day and they say, I have to get down to the state capitol and I need to stand up to this man who's essentially saying what Matt Walsh is saying. is allow children to grow up, right? Allow children to become adults. Or an adult, if you want to mutilate your own body, it's not really my business, right? It really is my business. But the idea that we should be
Pause it for a second.
Yes, again, right.
Yeah, because we know that's bullshit. We know that's not it at all. They don't want trans people to exist. That's just the easy their easy way of explaining this away to their listeners and viewers who maybe be okay with the idea of an adult being able to choose what they do with their body, freedom. Those people who actually believe that, the whole children thing that they push, that's their way of skirting that. But then we know how they feel about trans adults too.
Her colleague Jordan Peterson called the doctor that provided Elliot Page with his top surgery a butcher,
a criminal butcher.
A criminal butcher.
No, she said mutilation. I mean. Like, to do that mutilation, I don't care. You're calling it a mutilation when it's care.
I mean, at the end of the day, this is just like Nazi propaganda. She's just actively running interference for Nazis. And by Nazis, you mean like literally Hitler and the Nazi state and what they did. This is Holocaust revisionism. Just because it's not aimed at Jewish people doesn't mean it's not a problem. But, this is clearly what they're doing. And, Candace Owens knows better. The Ben Shapiro network knows better. But it's the people who watch this, and they don't feel the need to look it up. They don't feel the need to, like, this is readily available online. You can find this out. People scream it at them when they talk about it online. And, it's those people who will take this away and they will not realize that they're just like laundering Nazi propaganda when they talk to people outside in the outside world about it, until someone just like yells at them, like, you do know that that's just incorrect. If someone ever yells at them, they'll just go around just not knowing how backwards this is. And, Kanye West is a victim of that. I guess, he's a victim of that too now. It's kind of disgusting that she used him as exit liquidity for Twitter scam, but it is what it is.
Yeah, we got more.
With the notion that is a lie, by the way. It is a lie to tell a child that they can pick their gender. It is a lie to make a man believe that if he gets breast implants, he's suddenly a woman, right? Despite the fact that we know that it is a lie, from the top to the bottom of our society and our culture, we are perpetuating this lie to the detriment of young children.
Okay.
She literally, that's my point
really
though. She literally just said how it's fine when it comes to adults. And then she says she attacks a man who decides to get like top surgery or something. She's literally
that's because they have no
double-speaking,
agency. Trans people have no agency. They have no ability to determine their own lives. The only reason they're doing this is because of like the liberal orthodoxy that is being imposed upon them. If she actually spoke to a trans person, then maybe she would be able to have a different perspective on that. But suddenly Caitlyn Jenner is no longer on the short list of people they want to speak to about this issue.
I mean, supposedly you can't say anything online, but you can say all that. Like, I feel like that's the kind of thing that, if we had like a list of things you couldn't say online, like misinformation about the Holocaust and who was killed, would be on that list. It's on the list of a lot of countries and you can't say online, but it's kind of just evidence that you can basically say whatever you want online up until it affects the bottom line of whatever platform you're saying it on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And also, I wouldn't call, I wouldn't have a problem with people calling Matt Walsh a Nazi or a fascist. He, in his bio, calls himself a theocratic fascist as some sort of joke. I would call him a Confederate, though, and I think we should need to use that more and understand the homegrown nature of sort of white supremacist reaction. Here's a little clip of a Matt Walsh from a while ago. We can find that journalist later, but jumping on a pogo stick in a Confederate T-shirt.
What are you guys doing?
Showbreak! Get out! Leave! Close the door! Bring me pancakes!
Is this that backrooms meme everyone's talking about all the time? Like a backroom type deal?
The backroom thing, right?
Can you imagine? Yeah, you're wandering through the backrooms.
Monsters you see in the backrooms, right?
Yeah, you're wandering through the backrooms for 3 hours and you come across that.
It's also, I just gotta say too, it really is rich within weeks of her defending the anti-Semitism of Kanye West, for her to now have concern about or at least try to claim like that the Nazi ideology is running rampant among trans acceptance. It is interesting what kind of like historical repeats from the Holocaust that she's apparent, and this one's fictitious, obviously, but that she's interested in reassessing.
It shows a commitment.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a report in 2018 that
Reaffirming, I should say.
Kanye wanted to name his album Hitler. Now, I don't know if that's true. I'm willing to believe it, given recent track record.
He just thinks it's shocking, so he's like, oh.
But no, there's a report that
Hitler?
says there's been a report from people, sources close to him, that apparently he has over the years spoken out about how much he admires Hitler and the Nazis.
Great.
That just came out.
I mean,
this isn't a new thing, apparently.
Do you think he's not having that conversation with Candace Owens?
Mm-hmm.
Like, absolutely. Like, I'm close with Candace Owens. I'm going to wear a White Lives Matter T-shirt. I know she's gotten into this about Hitler was fine until he crossed the border issue. Of course, like Candace Owens is like, and I'm kind of shocked by it. Like how dumb you have to be to let Candace Owens ruin your life like this. And I mean, maybe, I guess I want to back off a little bit because I think I forgot about the mental illness component of this, but it's just like, it's wild to see her have this effect.
But at the same time, it's like, you know, I have empathy for that, but I can't have empathy for the wild.
There's something more there, though. Like, you know, there's plenty of mentally ill people who do not do this. I mean, this isn't come with the package. Certainly, you could acknowledge there's certainly mental illness issues there, without having to, hold back from the fact that this is also who Kanye seems to be.
I think sorry to interrupt real quick.
You were not, no.
Real quick to to I guess both Matt's point, I would just highlight, on the, on the back end, Candace Owens and a lot of people like her are like working their hardest to redefine what happened in the Holocaust and why it was a problem. They're working their hardest to redefine what the issue with Nazism was, because again, Nazism and fascism are incredibly discredited within our society just by name, and it's difficult when you have those ideologies to launder those talking points into society. And I think that one thing that as a society we've failed to grapple with is the actual causes. We talked about this on a few episodes ago of the Holocaust, and how a lot of the component pieces for what led to that genocide existed within our society, within American society and Western culture generally, and continue to exist. This because we dismantled the Nazi state and we dismantled explicit Italian fascism at the time doesn't mean we did any real reflection on what caused those things. And a lot of them were the genocidal experiments of the Americas. They were the genocidal experiments of the Africas. They were mixing with the anti-Semitism that was inherent to European society. Yes, but the Industrial Revolution gave a lot of gear and steam to that. Not steam, I guess is an ironic thing to say, but a lot of steam to that movement as well. So we just haven't, as a country or a society, had a reckoning with it. Had the fact that the Holocaust and the Nazi state weren't anomalies of modernity, that they were deeply, in fact, rooted in what we consider to be modernity in Western culture. And on the other end, with Kanye West, obviously the mental illness is a factor, but I think you have to also loop Kanye's the things that Kanye West has become hyper focused on with his his cohorts, the Dave Chappelle's, the Joe Rogans. And I think that there is, I think there is something to be said about a lot of celebrities becoming stagnant in whatever year they became the most popular. And so there are just a lot of celebrities that became very popular in the early to mid 2000s, and they're just stuck there. They cannot understand why movies like The Hot Chick are not funny anymore. They cannot understand why you can't, Rob Schneider's trying to understand why it's not 2017 anymore. And for a lot of those people, they've maintained some levels of success. Few of them have been successful the entire time, but they're, they haven't evolved with the times, and they're just demanding that no one else do it either.
And I think there's something kind of timeless about this. I'm reminded of when Bowie was going through, I think, a lot of addiction issues in the 70s, was also coincided with him going in an interview saying, I support fascism and Adolf Hitler was a rock star. And as a David Bowie fan, not my favorite phase of his career. And I think it's something to do with being a sort of celebrity individual for a long period of time is not good for anybody. And I don't know. It's
well,
depressing.
you have an entourage that is going to continue to be on your payroll until that money dries up, and they'll yes you until they're gone, and then by then it's too late for you. And that's what's going to happen with Kanye.
I mean, people are still trying to craft reasons why Kanye needs to be treated differently. And I think a lot of times it becomes less about the mental illness for a lot of people and more about this, people want to believe there's such a thing because a lot of people find themselves working that 9-to-5 grind as like fuck you money, that, that you can get to a level of wealthy and successful that allows you to just like basically become, completely untouchable within our society. And, maybe some people are like that in terms of what they're allowed to get away with. But, we've seen this happen before. I remember when Mel Gibson got totally blacklisted for like his tirades, and people pretend like that just didn't happen because they want to pretend like Kanye West is the first person to ever do this in modern history.
Yeah.
Right. I've seen a lot of that. People bringing up other celebrities who actually did face consequences for their actions years ago, all being used as like the example of how people get away with it. It's just not true. Like, there's a reason. Like, I do know Mel Gibson's attempting a comeback now.
Yeah,
I heard he's doing just now, and I don't think that should even be happening. But he did face some pretty serious consequences. The guy was one of the biggest actors in Hollywood who pretty much disappeared for the past decade because no one wanted to work with him.
No, but then he did that movie with Jodie Foster like 5 years after that. I don't know.
And she was excoriated over that. I remember she got a lot of shit for that.
Yeah.
I mean,
I like Jodie Foster.
Gibson was huge.
Surprised, but,
I think people don't realize how big Mel Gibson was.
Yeah, he was the guy in every movie. Like, he
Do
was
you guys
the
remember
one.
that movie What Women Want? I know, Brandon, you remember.
Oh, of course. Like, we were all young boys at that time, so I think that movie was particularly.
I mean, I watched it. Yeah, right. It was.
You have to understand how hard it is for me to not watch that movie or as part of one of my rewatches just because he's in it. That's very much the kind of thing that I specialize in watching.
I mean, come on, Helen Hunt. Helen Hunt's
movie is so bad.
It's a terrible movie. Yeah.
That's the cure for incels.
That's the kind of thing that they want to bring back. That's the kind of thing that people who peaked in 2003 think that we need to be doing again. So you're like, okay, no one even looks back on that time. Yeah, this is what they took from us. It's just like we took like Rob Schneider movies, and it's like, oh my god, come on! It's like no one's even canceling Rob Schneider. Like no one is trying to like even relitigate that time period because it's just like, things just suck then. Like,
it's funny this is what they took from us, like Roman architecture, and then like Pokemon Game Boy games and Rob Schneider movies.
I think that's just because, every so often you'll have people who claim to be into like philosophy, like on the right, but you always notice that their love of philosophy ends after like World War II, because that's when people start like to really be critical of Western culture and philosophy and like in large trends like postmodernism, post-structuralism, et cetera, critical theory. And so that's when they stop being interested in like, philosophy like Ayn Rand and start becoming interested in like, popular culture and like the little remnants of like problematic stuff that you could really find.
Right.
But the funny thing is, like, with those "this is what you took from us" memes that use the 90s as an example, is like, actually what happened was like you just grew up. Like, I'm sorry, you got older. Nothing's gone. Like, literally.
Yeah, responsibilities came.
Just have kids. I had kids, and I am rediscovering things that I was into when I was younger that are still there.
But
and in
part
fact,
of it is
there's more of it there too. Like all the games I was into, there's even more of it and more
emulator.
Yeah, it's like more than ever before. Like literally, you just grew up. Sorry, Emma, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I interrupted you first by accident, but like it just is. It's more than that though, because like the movies that Brandon is describing here, they just don't hit in the same way, and I feel like it gives people a certain amount of anxiety if they still have nostalgia for it. Movies like The New Guy. Do you remember that movie where it's in the first 10 minutes the school principal like breaks the guy's dick in half, and so then he can't get the girl? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I remember that movie. I don't remember that part.
DJ Squalls is in that one.
Yeah, DJ Qualls.
Yeah,
DJ
right.
Qualls, yeah.
Like it's just every single like comedy that had comedies had like some sort of budget. They all appealed to nerdy white men, and that was like what popular culture was. And now it's not that way anymore. And so people have to move on.
you can't paint a super broad brush. I don't want to get too down on the popular culture thing, but because like comedy movies of the early 2000s, I think just broadly were not very good. That's a broad brush, but like even romantic comedies started to be really bad around that time. Like that's when you get your 13 going on 30s, which people have even more nostalgia for. But like those kind of make it feel a little better. There are a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of those movies are bad, and so like, people don't tend to look back fondly on that era of like time. So it's funny for people to be like, everyone has their guilty pleasures, but like the landscape back then of comedy movies, you kind of have like a dark age until you get to like Judd Apatow and like Will Ferrell, I feel like, and then things kind of more consistently get all right.
Now that you say that, the 90s are really where the romantic comedy genre lived, and then they were kind of grasping at things in the mid 2000s, trying to reclaim that. Now romantic comedies basically just don't exist anymore.
In that era you were mentioning, Brandon, I usually was able to tell if it was going to be good if Paul Rudd was in it. If he was, then it was going to be a good movie. If he wasn't,
right?
I don't think hit or miss. Maybe what's his face, Mark Ruffalo. But then you knew it was going to be more of a female tinted romantic comedy than a male tinted romantic comedy.
Late 90s, I think late 90s or 2000 comedies were defined by like Adam Sandler and Friends, like the SNL cast from the early 90s, all getting their movies and being allowed to like evolve some characters, and they all were like pretty bad. I mean, I think the standout of that era is like Ben Stiller movies. Like Ben Stiller kind of maintains like a good quality of movie. He's in a lot of movies with Drew Barrymore at the time. Zoolander's great, but other than that, like come on, I feel like there was like an Adam Sandler or Adam Sandler's Friends movie out every month.
Yeah, I mean,
Master of Disguise.
Yeah. Someone's writing in saying that Bros is a good new romantic comedy. I just saw that in theaters.
I haven't heard it or seen it.
Wait, you went to the movies to see romantic comedy? People don't do that anymore.
I went
with the new Billy Eichner.
It was terrible.
Right.
Like
really?
I feel badly because I understand that it did not do well at the box office, and I was just like my friend and I like to go to the movies together, so we decided to see that. It was. Billy Eichner I've met him in person. Well, I'll just say he was a total dick when I met him in person, and so it kind of
separate from like his persona.
But I mean, it's kind of the same.
It's just him.
And he was just not nice to me. Yeah. And then I saw the movie, and I was like, okay, like I don't really think he's that. He doesn't seem like that appealing of a leading man, and I was right. It was just like. But I thought it would be way funnier. I could not wait for it to be over. And
So Emma, are you appearing on the Daily Wire tonight to give your review about Bros?
It's unfortunate because I really wanted to like it, and I liked, I liked Fire Island, which was another like gay romantic comedy that came out so much better. This one was just, it was bad in my opinion. But anyway, let's take a call.
Do we want to talk about the bingers?
Oh, I just picked up. Hold on 1 sec. Yeah. 818. Hello?
You there, caller?
Yeah.
You're far from your mic,
Pretty
it sounds
quiet.
like.
Can you hear me now?
A little bit better, yeah.
Hold on. Let me see if
That's much better, actually. Just go ahead. It's much better right now. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's Owen from LA. Hope you guys are doing well today. I've just been thinking about the Kanye West controversy nonstop. I myself am Jewish, have a lot of Jewish family, and it just doesn't sit well with me, especially being in LA, having that incident happen. Like I think it was last week where there was the Goyim TV put up those posters on the 405.
Right.
And I mean, the anti-Semitic violence has been an issue in my family before. In 2019, when there was the Poway shooting in San Diego at that synagogue, my uncle lives in San Diego, and that was the first synagogue he went to when he moved there. And God bless that he decided to move, and that happened, I don't know, pretty close to the incident. He actually moved like a month before, and he would have been there when that shooter was there. I'm scared shitless now, and my uncle's been talking about getting a gun now to protect himself because he doesn't want to have to deal with anti-Semitic violence. And I don't know, it's just such a scary moment. But what pisses me off the most is that a lot of these like conservatives who are being like, oh, I'm just a free thinker, I'm just questioning the establishment, and meanwhile they're just being a contrarian that's just parroting white supremacist, anti-Semitic, and Nazi talking points, and they think they get some sort of free pass. Like free speech doesn't apply to just being a fucking asshole who, sorry, excuse my French,
Fine.
who's just going to promote violence.
Wait, who's being the asshole? I couldn't hear you. Sorry.
Just like white supremacists, contrarians,
Yeah.
like, Candace Owens, just everybody on the right who thinks that, they're going to push the envelope with Kanye West. Like they finally got their guy who's going to go out there and say what they want to say, but they're too scared to say. And it's just there's going to be more and more of this, and it's not going to stop, and it's only going to intensify. Like as a critical theorist pointed out, the worse economic conditions get, and the worse our government, the more our government fails us, the more anti-Semitism there's going to be. And it's just scary. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if Sam talked about it more outside of the show, but it's I don't know. It's a really scary time to live in. What do you guys think?
I agree. I mean, go ahead, Brandon.
Oh no, I agree. I wasn't going to say anything too in depth. I was just going to say I think that people like Candace Owens, people like Alex Jones, people who spread conspiracy theories online, especially within this sort of like semi-legitimate space like Fox News, they want to define the conversation about free speech because they want you to forget that they're doing this for money. They want you to forget that, like, whether or not they actively believe, whether or not Candace Owens actively likes Hitler, this is more of a business that they are involved in. They launder Nazi talking points into mainstream media because it makes them money. And so by gesturing to the values of liberals, they can, like, delay people from using critical thinking long enough to, hopefully have it so ingratiated into our society that you just can't rip it out anymore. And maybe they've gone to that point, but I would just say, if you look at Kanye West, this is not to absolve him of his responsibility or agency, but he's a good example of like how they do not care for their fans. Like Candace Owens, she's been spending time with Kanye. If she really, cared about him on a personal level, as opposed to like him as a way to like launder more of this stuff and including her like business into like mainstream media, she would probably take him aside and like, hey, you're ruining your business. You're ruining your business. You need to maybe like pare things down, like have some like take some time on yourself. Like they are very willing to let their audience self-destruct, as well as our society, but certainly their audience to self-destruct in order to launder these talking points just to make money. And that's just part of why people are cracking down, like platforms are cracking down on this stuff, because it's it's just a business for these people.
Yeah,
I guess my sorry.
Go ahead, Owen. No.
My fear is that, they're going to crack down and it's going to have the Alex Jones effect where it's like, you take this guy off your platforms, but then people think, oh, he must be speaking truth because they keep shutting him down. And people are just going to go seek out that information, even if it becomes more fringe and hard to get.
I think that's yeah, go ahead, Brandon.
I would say, I think, that's a point that people bring up, the idea that maybe by hiding things, you might amplify them, the Barbra Streisand effect. But like it hasn't paired out with like Milo Yiannopoulos really. Now he's like the 8th billing at an online like, Twitch ripoff site like thing. So that doesn't tend to always have the effect. You can't really silence Kanye because he has so much money, even if these businesses are going under. But I think what you're identifying is more of a failure of it's a failure of our society at a lot of levels. But I don't think the solution can be to allow people to just kind of like make money off of spreading bigotry, even if those people are like the larger platforms themselves, which are, in many ways also monetizing the bigotry, even if they're not like actively the ones who are putting it out. They want you to forget that, well, every time Candace Owens or whatever tweet goes viral, they make money. They advertise those people, they get another data point, and it's just become an entire ecosystem where people can either monetize the bigotry directly or, at least like parasitically.
Yeah, I mean, the Streisand effect, like you said, like that's a real and can be a powerful sort of dynamic. It's not nearly as powerful as being on the in the sort of marketplace and the window of Twitter or YouTube because of the algorithm put you there. Like no amount of Streisand effect can do what for Alex Jones was done by appearing on like when people first opened YouTube.
I just want to say we misspoke. Yeah. It's actually the butterfly effect we're referring to.
Okay.
Yeah, and just one final thing. I mean, I don't disagree. I definitely think that these people need to be taken off these large social media platforms, and I think it will hurt their platform. But ultimately, I mean, I don't think it's going to address the root of the problem.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be, if it's Kanye now, there's probably be another artist who comes out in 5 years and 2 years and says the same thing, and then it's going to have the same issue. It's just once someone is a pioneer and takes that first step and oh, I'm going to come out and say this because I know it's going to drive up my engagement, and or they have, I don't know, mental issues like Kanye, but I don't really think that excuses what he's saying. I think we're just going to see more and more people who think they're emboldened and that they can do this and that they're going to have backing because they see all the people on Twitter who are coming out and being like, Kanye's actually right about this,
Yeah. Well, the good news is that it seems like, at the very least, the response to this anti-Semitism, from him was swift, and hopefully, there's like an infrastructure where people can kind of react once it happens again, because people experience this. So appreciate it, Owen.
Yeah, thank you. Left is best.
Left is best. Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, so let's get into Matt Binder.
Oh.
Matt Binder did a little bit of an investigative report, we could call it, on some suspicious activity on social media that you observed. And we can always count on you for a deep dive. And this one is particularly fun because Jimmy Dore may or may not have a sock puppet Twitter account that exclusively basically defends Jimmy Dore from criticism.
I tweeted a comment about a Jimmy Dore clip that the Surfs posted on their Twitter account on Monday. And I totally thought nothing of it after I tweeted it. We're now almost 2 days later, and I receive a reply to the tweet. And the reply says, let me pull it up on the screen here. Jimmy literally says, I'm for the mural. And again, this is talking about that local news clip that showed these parents engaging in an anti-LGBTQ and satanic panic type thing, even saying there's witchcraft imagery, satanic imagery in this mural, harassing this teen girl to tears, the girl who created it. So this Twitter account says, Two Coats is their name, and their Twitter username is @libtard01. Jimmy literally says, I'm for the mural, showing support for the teen girl and her artwork. He's against canceling Halloween, which is why he says both sides. I get you hate Jimmy, but can you just one time tell the truth about what he's saying instead of clipping and twisting it?
Just one
time. And I'm like, whoa, this tweet, this reply to my tweet's getting a lot of attention for just a random reply. And so I check out who this person is, and they're really just a nobody, which is fine. But
all right, can you pause it just for 1 second? Just keep it up. Matt, after I watched this video last night, I went to @libtard01, and I saw that one Sam Seder has chosen to follow
right now.
Right,
yeah, he's following him now.
I was like, it was just like the only person I know that mutually follows @libtard01 is now Sam, which is just what makes Sam so special, right? Like, he's not going to advertise it, but he wants the owner of @libtard01 to know, I see you. So,
right.
Yeah, keep going.
Followers. Their Twitter account seems to solely be replies defending Jimmy Dore. There they are sharing a video attacking Sam Seder's criticisms of Jimmy Dore. There we go, another Jimmy Dore tweet. Anti-Ukraine. See, there's some more COVID conspiracy theories. More Jimmy Dore promotion, more Jimmy Dore promotion, more Jimmy Dore promotion. It's really just an account almost solely defending Jimmy Dore and then tweeting out pretty much the same sort of content that Jimmy Dore talks about on his show, which again, fine, maybe it's a Jimmy Dore fan. But I was struck by the interest this random reply to an almost 2-day-old tweet got. And then I check. And the first person who retweeted it is Jimmy Dore. Now I'm thinking, that's weird, but maybe, no, look. There's no Jimmy Dore tag. He doesn't tag @Jimmy Dore in this tweet. No, he doesn't.
You didn't.
That's fine. Maybe Jimmy Dore is a name searcher. I mean, that's really lame. You know, people who go on Twitter and search their name, without the @ in hopes of finding people like, subtweeting them. Whatever you think of it, at least that would explain how Jimmy Dore found it, and that would solve that mystery. Nothing more there. But look at the tweet. Jimmy literally says, he refers to Jimmy Dore again, but he just says, "I get you hate Jimmy." He never says Jimmy Dore. To find this tweet, you would have to search just Jimmy. And let's just do that. There's probably going to be some vulgar stuff, maybe. Who knows? But let's just search Jimmy.
This is investigative journalism, Binder.
Latest.
There we go. Yeah.
Jimmy VC. Hey, that's about the Rangers.
We're looking at 5 tweets with the word Jimmy in a 5-second time span. Let's refresh this. Brand new tweets coming in just a span of seconds.
So many hockey tweets.
There you go.
Good for my agenda.
Coming in. So I'm really questioning what's going on here. So then I look at, and let me pull this up here. I look at my replies. And now I can't tell the exact time Jimmy Dore retweeted it, but I can see when the first person replied to Jimmy Dore's retweet, because it includes me, that Twitter account with the 55 followers, and it would include @Jimmy Dore, because they'd be replying to Jimmy Dore's retweet. And so the original tweet from @libtard01 with the 55 followers was posted at 7:38 p.m. October 25th. That's right now. That's today. Just a few hours ago. 7:38 p.m. And the first person replying to Jimmy Dore's retweet comes in almost right away at 7:41 p.m. So that means Jimmy Dore retweeted this 55 follower Twitter account who did not @ him, who did not even type the words Jimmy Dore in their tweet so you could find it if you search for the search term Jimmy Dore on Twitter. Jimmy Dore retweeted that tweet because I don't know, that's when someone replied to his retweet of the 55 follower tweet. So sometime within the 3-minute span that libtard01 tweeted this at me, Jimmy Dore found it and retweeted it within 3 minutes of this tweet being posted. And now I'm really thinking, I gotta give Jimmy Dore the benefit of the doubt here. Jimmy Dore might follow the guy. And even though this is a reply, Twitter's weird sometimes, maybe the tweet came up in Jimmy Dore's feed. So I'm looking at the 55 followers. This guy's a big Jimmy Dore fan, so maybe Jimmy Dore is a follower of his. Let's scroll right now through all of @libtard01's tweets. Followers. And see if Jimmy Dore's on this list. It's 55 people following him, so it shouldn't be that long.
The People's Party follows him.
I'm looking.
Wait, and
I'm looking. No, Jimmy Dore does not follow this guy. So that begs the question. How the hell did Jimmy Dore find this tweet from a 55 follower account that he does not follow, that did not @ him, that did not write the name in full Jimmy Dore so that it's easily searchable? How did he find this tweet within 3 minutes of it being posted for him to retweet it to his followers?
I'm just good.
I have a theory. But I'm a
You stop it there. That's everything. You know the theory. You know the theory.
Well,
you know the theory.
The thing is like my final follow-up question to this thorough investigative report here, Matt Binder, is: does Jimmy Dore follow you?
He does, but my tweet was 2 days old. So the odds.
It would have to be, it would have to be he just randomly decided to check the replies of that old tweet the exact same moment that this libtard01 decided
within
to
3 minutes.
Right.
It's just too. I know people. Some people have said that. Well, he follows you, or the Surf's tweet, or your original tweet from 2 days before this say Jimmy Dore. But again, the coincidental nature of him just happening to look at this when the one pro Jimmy Dore reply comes in, within that 3-minute span of him retweeting it, it would be the world's. Again, it's a possibility. That's why this is just a theory. I don't have any definitive proof, but it would be the world's biggest coincidence.
Maybe it's the same producer who came up with that vaccine misinformation that Jimmy had to fire. Maybe that's who Libtardo1 is.
I hate to give him any credit, but this is exactly what Elon Musk was talking about with the bots. Elon Musk knows because he has them himself allegedly, but this is just Twitter's like 50% bots apparently. I guess I underestimated him.
Well, we can neither confirm nor deny this, but that's a thorough investigation.
It's just a theory. It's just a theory.
Is Jimmy and the sock puppet? They're running away from Jimmy's real record on this because the most recent tweet is a quote tweet of Nina Turner where she says there's a difference, or supposed to be a difference between progressives and liberals. Libtardo1 says, well, when people tried to hold you progressives accountable, you sided with the politicians over the healthcare activists. So this is 100% a virtue signal from somebody who's showing us who she is already. Who did Jimmy Dore endorse in the fucking primary that most recently happened? Was it the homophobic freak Tulsi Gabbard who said that Medicare for all was anti-American? That's who Jimmy Dore used his platform to endorse. So Libtardo1, if you're not Jimmy Dore, I'd like to see what your response is to that. Why did you undermine?
Invitation to come on this show.
Yeah, call in Libtardo1.
Yeah, please. And just provide some verification that it's you. Well, if you call into the show, you can tweet out like, hey, I'm on with the Majority Report now, and then we can talk to you. Like, we'll be able to know that that's who we're speaking to. If you're not Jimmy Dore. If you're not.
Does that tweet from that reply from Libtardo1, Matt, does that have any retweets?
No, just 2 replies. Somebody saying, just tweet this on your main account, Jimbo.
Because someone brought up the idea after I did that live stream and clipped it that you should check their other replies and see, if they get retweeted and by who. And I looked through multiple previous tweets from them. And lo and behold, any tweet of theirs that has a bunch of retweets and likes, if you click the retweets and scroll down, Jimmy Dore is the first person to retweet this account.
Just follow
over and over again.
Jimmy, throw your fan Libtardo1 a follow,
it's
man.
It's really, honestly, why don't you support the people that support you?
Also, though, if he's not following him, then how does he seem to know whenever Libtardo1 drops these truth bombs over and over and over again if they're not showing up in his feed?
He just has a sixth sense from the 5G that he got when he got vaccinated, which he deeply regrets.
Well, do you remember during the Democratic Party primary, the Liz Smith Chinadu online scandal? Remember that? The account that was like people thought was like Liz Smith's like secret burner account, and then they got like an African man to like interview for it. It was a whole thing.
Remember that?
I'm sure that seems like 100,000 years ago, but that was like a whole thing.
God, it rings a bell, but I can't remember.
Yeah, a lot has happened since then.
All right, well, with that said, we are going to take one final call. That was fun. Calling from a 919 area code. Here's hoping you are Libtardo1.
Hello, this is me.
This is you. Who is you?
This is Libtardo1.
Ah, Libtardo1.
I'm just joking.
Damn.
Sorry. So this is Ryan from North Carolina.
Ryan from North Carolina, what's on your mind?
I just wanted to talk about an experience I had voting, and just kind of maybe make other people aware as I'm, unaware, but, for me, school board, sorry, I'm a little nervous here, so.
It's okay.
Bear with me.
Don't worry.
People going for school board positions don't have political affiliation listed on the ballot. So, when I would vote, I would typically just, pick at random.
Right.
But as I was going in, there was a guy campaigning effectively.
Okay.
And, normally I just take their card and walk on and just ignore it. But he came up and said, "Hey, I'm running for school board." So, I figured, hey, what the hell? I'll entertain this guy and see if maybe I don't pick one at random this time. And, he gives me his whole spiel, and like a couple of things were wrong already. First, he looked like a cop, and I was already like, well, I don't like this guy initially, so. But like one of the things he brings up is like, oh, all the problems we're having in schools, and kids they're just having all kind of sex in schools. It's all kind of sex.
Right.
And that's already like, okay. I mean, teenagers and stuff. That's a thing. But the part that kind of just really disgusted me about was the follow-up to that, which was, us guys. I'm a mid-30s guy. He's probably around my age, if I had to guess. Back in our day, we did that kind of thing, ha ha ha, that whole machismo crap. And I was just like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So
then you looked into it, and what is it, an anti-trans school board thing?
I didn't look into it in depth, but I did look him up after I had the interaction. And because, again, this is such a unique thing for me, is, as he's giving me a spiel, I did start to push back because he just kept saying like, oh, well, the solution to the problems is SROs. We need more SROs.
Okay.
And that was, and even to me, using that language was already irritating because like it's a cop. You don't have to use some coded language to disguise what this person is to, like the layman person who isn't, aware of certain acronyms. So I kind of pushed back and said, so your solution to the problems are more cops in schools.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. And I was like, I don't agree with that. So, and then he just basically proceeded to argue with me for the next minute or two. And the weird thing about the interaction was that as I started to push back, he actually pushed his cute little blazer to the side and started recording the conversation. Which again was just kind of, hey, if you want to post your little social media that you triggered a lib, I guess good for you, but whatever. But to your point, I did look him up, and I didn't look in very much detail because everything was pretty much obvious. But one of the first things I saw was that he has a video in the thumbnail with Tucker Carlson. Ah, there we go. And then the title of another video was something to the effect of kids wearing masks in schools are a form of grooming or something to that effect.
Yeah.
So
that's the through line. Well, here's the lesson, and I'm sorry you had that interaction because it's just like always frustrating in daily life. People need to look up who's running for school board before they vote.
And run if you can.
And
yeah. The demographic of dads who wear those shirts that say, if you touch my daughter, I'll touch my gun, is becoming very active in local politics, local school board politics for the first time. So you got to be careful about that.
Yeah, those dads like who insist on being the third person in the prom photo, and they're like bringing out their rifle.
It's often not even dads. It's like uncles and shit. Like I'm an uncle, and I care about the trans people. That's literally happening.
And those are that Venn diagram of uncles who also get like weirdly handsy with their nieces when they get drunk is a circle. But
again, being against sex education for children is inviting children to be naive enough not to know where boundaries are supposed to be crossed.
Right. Mm-hmm.
We won't. Our kids won't be safe until there is one police officer per child in this country in every school.
Every child needs a mom, a dad, and a cop.
Yeah.
All right. Well, appreciate
I agree. Yeah, but yeah, that the moral of the story is, as you say, is just kind of clearly I was ignorant and I shouldn't have been, and that's just kind of to point out if there are people like me who make these unfortunate decisions to kind of just do a little bit more research before you walk into the poll.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think school board politics are pretty interesting. It's what I studied when I was getting my PhD. I think a lot of people just like don't necessarily understand like the level of power that school boards have. And sometimes, if you're not engaged, they take them away. A low school board election turnout can lead to like the positions just being, filled by the mayor or filled by some combination of like local politicians. But, it's definitely something that you can look into if you're interested in enacting real change on the local level.
All right, that's the final call of the day, guys. I'm sorry, no more calls. We'll be reading some IMs and get out of here. Alan in Carolina 4th. There's usually a Democratic Party table that will tell you the Democratic candidates on the ballot, even if in the nonpartisan races. I've been canvassing and poll greeting, so please check in. Also, in some cases, there isn't even a Dem running, so that could also be an issue. That makes sense. Thames Darwin, you joke about a mom, a dad, and a cop for every school kid, but who's going to help her decide about her abortion? Good.
Well, the local politician.
Right, so it's actually a
Dr. Oz.
Takes a village.
Jagoff comedian, typical MSNBC leftist, accusing everyone of being a sock account that disagrees with them. Libtard01, hey, I don't know who you think you are claiming I'm Jimmy Dore. No evidence. My name is Jimmy Dore, and I just happen to support all of the ideas and positions of Jimmy Dore, okay? Yes. Charlie Sayer says, Libtard01 needs to debate Sam Seder. Agreed.
The thing is, in that case, I bet they would actually, if Libtardo1 really is who we think it is, he would probably get somebody to play Libtardo1 and then prove once and for all that it's not.
Matt Lector voice. Matt, please give us some reading of @Libtardo1 tweets.
I think I already did.
Soon enough.
Jimmy literally says I'm for the meal, showing support for the teen girl and her artwork. He's against canceling Halloween.
By the way, that thing he's talking about, canceling Halloween, what they did, and I covered this too on the show, is very, very clever. They wanted to cover that story. It was him and Jackson Hinkle, by the way, on the show together.
Big time loser.
And they wanted to cover that horrible video of those parents at that school harassing this teen girl over a painting she did.
Yeah, we covered it on the show here.
Yeah, and I covered it that specific thing too. And they wanted to cover it, I guess, but I guess they realized that wouldn't play for their audience, so they had to put it together in a segment with another clip about this school county basically canceling the Halloween parade for the students. And their claim via this local news report was that it was woke parents canceling the parade because of vague inclusion issues or whatever. So Halloween had to be canceled over inclusion because of woke parents. And it turns out, if you look a little bit into the actual local coverage of the report, what was canceled was the Halloween parade, and that's it. Not Halloween is canceled altogether. Kids were able to still wear costumes on Halloween if they want to. The reason is safety issues. They couldn't get enough security to cover all the different places parents or community members could be watching these kids parade around the school and make sure that the kids were safe.
Yeah. No, you want to cancel Halloween because of Fauci.
Right, but they put this segment together, and the focus throughout is either mostly on the Halloween segment or how this shows both sides are bad. Jimmy even says both sides are mental, talking about the woke parents, who again were not woke parents, who wanted to cancel Halloween. Again, Halloween wasn't canceled. And then on the example of the right being crazy were these literal people, these adults, harassing this teen girl.
Calling
and if
her
you
satanic.
Yeah, and of course it's a false equivalency. One is just like a student safety issue. Another is an actual example of the right wing going insane and how scary that is. They're harassing this teen girl over these conspiracy
Sounds like they're canceling
theories. Halloween. Right, but by putting it both in the segment together, they made sure that their audience ignored the right-wing part of it all. Because if you look through their comments on this video that had over 100,000 views, it's all people focusing on the woke libs canceling Halloween and nobody caring about this teen girl being harassed by crazy-ass conspiracy theorists.
All right, we're going to read like 10 more IMs and then we got to wrap up. But yes, that story is absolutely insane. No, thank you for clarifying. Chris Burdick, anybody who's nostalgic for when Rob Schneider was popular is clearly suffering from the Mandela effect. Even at the height of his fame, he was a D-lister. He was only a movie star in the sense that Carrot Top and Pauly Shore were movie stars. I'm convinced that those movies were mainly tax write-offs.
Rob Schneider is an important figure, I think, in all of our lives of our generation for like discernment and learning like what's funny and actually what's trying too hard and failing at being funny. Like everyone has to realize, oh yeah, this stuff there's diminishing returns with this gentleman.
Aaron is not cool. Bros was yeah, I mean, it's just like I don't know. I thought everyone around him, Billy Eichner, was good, but I just think Billy Eichner was not a good romantic lead, and it wasn't particularly very funny. Odd homonym. Now I need to know when what Brandon's favorite Nancy Meyers movie is. Okay, go quick, Brandon. Nancy Meyers.
The Host.
Oh. The Host? Is that one of hers?
The Holiday.
The Holiday.
No, that's Stephanie Meyer, Brandon.
Oh.
Nancy Meyers is,
I was thinking Stephanie Myers too. And then when Brandon said The Host, I was thinking of that Korean.
I'm a woman, of course I know what Nancy Meyers is. It's
like The Holiday.
It's complicated.
It's complicated.
Something's gotta give. I love Something's Gotta Give.
I'm gonna be honest. I like The Holiday. I'm more, and this is
so
gonna, I know you can't say anything anymore. I know you're not allowed to say anything. I'm a big Hugh Grant fan, so even though like there's a lot of problematic one, I love music
you like
and
when
lyrics.
a British man is a bit stumbling and polite and it makes him very charming, right?
The world's most charming British man, Hugh Grant.
Oh, this is an
Very
easy one for
disarming.
me. I'll go with the Parent Trap remake. That was good. Lindsay Lohan was good in that.
I didn't know Nancy Meyers did that. Okay, well, hell yeah.
According to Google, she did.
She directed it?
Quick, I'm looking really quick.
This is important stuff.
It's important to me. It's important to me.
She did direct it, so that's
Yeah, she did.
definitely my favorite too. Even though I
Okay,
still think it's absolutely psychotic that those two incredibly wealthy parents decided to split up those two children and never addressed it or brought it up.
You actually have to like ignore that part because it's borderline child abuse.
Ignore the child abuse for these parents who had immense resources to make it work no matter where they were in the world. But
yeah, let's just never tell them about each other.
one of them's a famous fashion designer, and the other's like lives on a mansion in wine
They
country.
can like commission a love boat for their like surprise encounter. Like it's like they have a lot of money at their disposal. They have they have a nanny and a butler.
Although I'm very happy about Lindsay Lohan's return to movies, but anyway.
Oh, she's coming
I
back?
think the plot should have been that they cloned her. That was like neither parent could live without the child, so they secretly had her cloned, and then they split them up. That would have been a way better way to get around it.
Okay,
Is
three
she,
more.
Is she doing okay now, or are we going to see a collab with Kanye in the future?
I think she's doing well. I mean, she sounds very lucid, and I'm here for it.
Good,
Benzen 6. I feel like I'm in an alternate universe to see George Conway promoting Lula on Twitter. Yeah, I didn't see that but yeah, I mean, that's on Sunday, the election. Kid has it Politburo approved. My dad is probably close to Matt Walsh in ideology, and he is shocked when he hears non-theocratic positions on the radio. Like you all said, if you want someone to stay in your life, sometimes your only option is to never talk about it. Right. Ligma balls. Okay. If Kanye loses all his contracts, he can still put good music if he has any left in him. Release it himself, make a shitload of money. He is not canceled except for his anti-Semitism and brain dead political takes. Well, he seems incapable of putting out a good album at any recent moment. But
and even if he did, like I got a lot of stuff to listen to. I don't know if I'm going to get to it very fast, but yeah, I mean he hasn't put out good music for a while.
And the final, yeah.
I was gonna say I know people are desperate for Donda 3, but I mean I can't do it. We just gotta leave it in the past.
We can't pretend.
All I want to know is which album was going to be called Hitler, or if it was going to be a new album. Like if he was going to like replace it with like something else. Like if it was like My Beautiful Dark Fantasy.
It feels like that might have been after Yeezy, right? Or Yeezus, after Yeezus.
Did you see that news about his weird school today?
I did.
It
but
closed.
We have to wrap up the
depressing.
show, so we can't get into it.
All right.
And the final IM of the day. Here we go. Manasai. Oh my God. I just saw a tweet about Kanye's Donda Academy BS closed unexpectedly. They said there's no school tomorrow and they'll support families in their transitions. But does that mean they're getting their $15,000 of tuition back? He literally pumped and dumped education. That's insane. Yeah. Well,
I gotta say though, if you gave Kanye $15,000 to educate your kids, I don't feel bad for that scam.
I know, but it is
there.
Trump. It's Trump University. That's why he likes Trump. That's because they're
we're
the
just
same kind of garbage.
It's just sad, but we're just like literally like 2 weeks away from George Bush putting out a video like Kanye West doesn't care about black people, and honestly, he might be right.
Might be right.
Looking back, it seems like that Kanye moment was actually an endorsement.
All right, guys. Yeah, right. Exactly. Great show. Really appreciate it. We will see you all tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive